runners from everywhere, all over the world, going to be patting down your streets. It's New York City Marathon Day. 18,000 runners. That's incredible. Get your Dixie cups out and help those folks along the way with some water. And for all you marathoners, time to get up and stretch those legs. It's going to be a long day.
When the voice of the disc jockey is heard in the land, you know that morning has arrived. Sunday morning, normally New York's quiet time. But this Sunday morning is a time of excitement and anticipation. 2.5 million people will watch 18,000 runners, each with a special motivation. Why does one man play dress-up as he runs? Why does another balance a bottle and tray for 26 miles? The motivation of a cerebral palsy victim to complete the course, no matter how long it takes, is more easily understood. The crowd stays for long hours to urge on the slower runners, but their early cheers are for winners, for world-class elite runners like Grete, a Norwegian who has made the sidewalks of New York a second home with 5 victories here. Last year, Rod Dixon finally ran past Jeff Smith with the finish line in sight. Smith in his first marathon had led for so long, but the final triumph was Dixon's. He had stayed the course until the bitter end of that long blue line. Now, as you watch the live picture through the fog and the mist this morning, the finish line waits for another winner. Central Park is the beautiful finishing background for the race. The leaves just past their feet. But before that, they'll run through a kaleidoscope of New York neighborhoods. When they run past the single bars of First Avenue, they'll have reached the island of Manhattan. And just before that, they pass the fashionable high-rises of Sutton Place. They'll have spent a long part of the race in the racially mixed streets of Brooklyn. But it begins in a few minutes here on the Staten Island side of the great Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Here, 18,000 life stories reach a common high point. ABC Sports presents the 1984 New York City Marathon.
This ABC Sports exclusive is brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, engineered like no other car in the world. By the American Express card, don't leave home without it. By Bud Light, the best has a taste all its own, satisfying but never filling. And by Money, we help people manage their money.
The weather will be a major factor. Visually, as you saw, it's foggy and misty, but look at the temperature. It's warm, and the humidity, 88%. That could be the key factor. It's going to be a tough one for the runners today. Well, good morning. I'm Jim McKay with Diana Nyad and Marty LaQuarrie here in our ABC Marathon Control. And you know, the loneliness of the long-distance runner is a thing of the past. Once upon a time, a few short years ago, in fact, this was a very lonely business. Except for Boston once a year and the Olympic Marathon every 4 years, the marathoner had a very lonely life, padding through the countryside, disturbed only by maybe the twitter of the birds and an occasional passing truck. No more. Marathoning has become big-time sport and big-time business. Big-time sport, well, it all began here in the streets of New York with the run around Central Park. 14 years ago, 126 runners, and look at today. More than 17,000, almost 18,000 runners are now massed at the start line. Big money? Well, take a look at another graphic illustration. The money is on top of the table these days. A little confused at the moment, but here it comes. $25,000 plus a car to the men's and women's winners. Identical prizes, you'll notice, for the first 3 men, the first 3 women. After that, the prizes are slightly different, down to 20th place, but that's mainly because there are many more men in the race than there are women. As I said, money on top of the table. That will be a story that we'll take up in greater detail as we go along. So we're just about ready for the start of the New York City Marathon. I introduced very briefly Diana and Marty. Let's go to Marty LaQuarrie now, one of America's all-time great middle-distance runners, a man who ran in this for fun at least one time. How do you see this year's men's race, Marty?
Well, perhaps in distance running, as no other sport, the weather is a very big factor, and we're looking at what should be the hottest and certainly the most humid New York Marathon ever. And that causes 2 things to happen at the front of the pack. The natural front runners, the guys that like to go out and run away from the pack, get very conservative, because even the best runners can succumb to the heat and the humidity. So they get conservative, the pack stays tighter. The second thing that happens is the hotter it gets, the more chances there are for upsets. And that's on a lot of marathoners' minds this week, because last week a man who finished a marathon for his first time set a world record. So there's a lot of positive thinkers who think that they may be the next Steve Jones and are looking to pop that big race.
Look out for the man you do not know in this marathon. Now to Diana Nyad, who will be our expert on the women's race. How do you see that?
The exciting thing to me is that there are 3,500 women in this race, more or less. The largest women's field ever assembled for a marathon. These are not weekend joggers. They've all made a very serious commitment at the back of the pack even. And at the front of the pack, it's a deep field. 10 Olympians from LA, starting, of course, with silver medalist in Los Angeles summer, Grete Waitz from Norway. She may be the best-known face in the entire marathon today. She's won it 5 times. She wants the 6th. She doesn't like the heat, but she's not afraid of it. I'll mention just a couple others before we get to the race. Laura Fogli from Italy was second here last year. She proved in LA that she can run in the humidity. And I'm going to go out on a limb and mention one young American who's never run a marathon, but we've learned that that means nothing these days. Her name is Judy St. Hilaire. We'll watch for her today.
Okay, let's take a look now at the wide shot as we go out to the start line. More than 17,000 runners massed there, and among them, sitting on a vehicle, is Bill Rogers, a man who won this race 4 times. He sits just under his own camera out there, which you'll see kind of looks like a huge motorcycle helmet. That's a balancing thing, so our camera will stay steady through the streets of New York, the potholes, and the ups and downs. Bill, how do you see the race?
Yes, Jim. The start here is all the elite runners are out here now. The fog is breaking up. As you folks were talking before, humidity is going to be the major factor. It's going to affect the strategy in this race. This is not going to be like last year where you had 10, 20 men running totally without any concern for the pace. Here there's going to be a strategy race, and whether Rod Dixon can succeed a second time, he's a guy who likes to put his cards on the table only at the last minute. Now for the women's field, Larry Rawson.
Thank you, Bill. I've done the research on the women's race, and this is the finest quality women's marathon ever held here in New York. The Olympic women marathoners are here from 7 nations of the world. The wind, well, it won't be much of a factor today, but what wind there will be an Irish one. It should be at the runner's back for probably 65, maybe 70% of the race. And to keep you up in the developments of the women's race, I'll be in a lead vehicle with a motorcycle sidecar, actually, and we'll be following that women's race and then going back into the pack to bring you the additional dimension, which is the spectacle of the New York City Marathon. Jim?
Okay, Larry Rawson, known usually as the voice of the Boston Marathon. This, by the way, is not the largest crowd ever amassed on this spot. In the summer of 1776, General Sir William Howe brought 30,000 British redcoats to this very spot. Here they made camp before going across the water to begin the Battle of Long Island. Right now, let's go to Donna De Verona. She's at the start. You'll see her in the middle of the race and again with the winner at the end. Donna?
Here it's humid. It's like blanket over the ceiling. Story of the leaders, but also it's the story of 17,000 individual hardworking, ordinary people trying an extraordinary thing. They know they're on camera, they're waving. With me is Liz Burns, model. This is your first time ever. There were 43,000 people that couldn't participate here. The entries were turned away. Tell me what it's like for them to be here at the start line.
Oh, Donna, it's such a marvelous, fantastic experience. It's energy teeming in the air. There's a vitality, real health, great joy. And for those people who didn't make it, you've got to try. You've got to try next year because this is an experience not to be missed. So do try.
Okay, good luck. Now back to you, Gary Finelli. Jim McKay.
She was referring to Gary Finelli, the fellow in the goat suit standing next to her, as a matter of fact. Donna was. Donna De Verona out at the start line at Fort Wadsworth on Staten Island. That's the only time they will touch Staten Island, right here before they go up over the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. In fact, here is a simplified map of the course. They go over the bridge into Brooklyn. They're in Brooklyn for a long, long time, 10, 11 miles, then over into Queens, into Manhattan, up into the Bronx, back down to Manhattan. Well, let's get a closer look at it from our colleague, Jack Whitaker.
The engineers who designed the beautiful Verrazzano Bridge never realized that one day it would have to support 18,000 runners. But support them it will as they start on the Staten Island side, cross over the waters of the harbor of New York, which was the front door to America for so many of our immigrant families. Once across the bridge, they enter the incredible borough of Brooklyn, which embraces about every ethnic group in the world. In Brooklyn, you can go around the world in 80 minutes. Beginning in Bay Ridge, a traditionally Scandinavian neighborhood, the runners split into 2 groups as they go up 4th Avenue past churches and synagogues of every denomination known and some that are not known. They run through the Hispanic neighborhoods of Sunset Park and Park Slope. Finally coming to the Williamsburg Savings Bank, where the 2 lanes of runners merge into one as they move across Flatbush Avenue in the very heart of the borough. Here in the Williamsburg section, the Hasidic Jews will line the streets trying to understand why so many people waste their time running. After that, the runners go through the Polish section of Greenpoint, across the Pulaski Bridge into the Borough of Queens. Then, after passing by the warehouses of Long Island City, they come at last to the lacy necklace of steel known as the Queensboro Bridge, which takes them to the island of Manhattan. Once across the bridge, the cultural landscape changes abruptly. The runners come off this ramp down 59th Street and turn north up First Avenue, where they'll pass some of the more glittering of New York's bars and restaurants. And from T.J. Tucker's here at First Avenue and 59th Street all the way up through the 90s, the Leather Pants and Bloody Mary set will be lustily cheering on the runners. Then another change of beat as the athletes leave the high-rises and move into Spanish Harlem. Next, it's over the Willis Avenue Bridge into the Bronx, the only time the race is run on the mainland. It is here that the 20-mile mark will be reached. Then back into Manhattan, and yet another ethnic change as the race proceeds through the black community of Harlem. Then down Fifth Avenue, and at last into Central Park, in the shadow of the towers of Manhattan. By the time they reach here, the finish line, they will have touched all 5 boroughs of the city and the cultures of the world. And it's altogether fitting that this race should end in Central Park, where thousands of New Yorkers run every day of the week and where hundreds of thousands of strangers come and visit. Here's one now. Pardon me, sir. Are you going to be watching the New York City Marathon?
I'm going to be at the starting line and at the finishing line. I'm going to actually be shooting off the cannon and awarding the prizes.
You can take his word of honor for that. So sit back now and enjoy the New York City Marathon, a celebration not only of New York City, but of America as well.
Okay, Jack, His Honor Mayor Ed Koch of New York. They'll run through the fog and the mist, following that long blue line in New York. Again, there is the picture at Fort Wadsworth on Staten Island. It's right by the toll gate for the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Up in the front are the elite runners. They are seated to run at the front of the peg. Behind them will come all the first-timers, all the tens of thousands, well, 17,000 altogether, almost 18,000 runners. There you see the entries were 18,300 and some. The actual number that have shown up is 17,800. The veterans, 13,000. Rookies, 4,500 of them. By the way, an average of 90% of the people who run this race finish it. I think that's a remarkable statistic. Noel Johnson back again at age 85, and Mamie Videra here at age 69 is the oldest woman. There's you see what we face camera-wise. We have 31 cameras. We have 4 helicopters. We got 4 moving vehicles, but that fog is going to be a problem unless it lifts. But you can see it's burning off the top of the stanchion right now. I don't think visibility actually be a problem for the runners, Marty.
No, but it kind of reminds me, this is the start, but for those rookies, this is kind of the finish to finally get into the race. And the tower peeking out through the cloud just kind of reminds me of the Holy Grail, and some of them have finally gotten there.
Just think, our cameraman is up there. That's 700 feet above the water where you were looking down from.
There's a good shot of the toll booths up there. This year they've had to widen out the start and open a few more toll booths than they had in the past years, because the elite runners have their time and their space, but the people in the back, they take maybe, you know, twice as long as they should across the bridge, so they've got a little better time this year.
Okay, Mayor Ed Koch about to fire the cannon that will start the race. And the great race of New York is underway. Started in 1970, remember, with 126 runners, almost 18,000 out there today. One of the great sights in sport, really, are these runners as they head up the bridge. The entire bridge will be covered with runners in a matter of minutes here. Some of the starters won't cross that starting line for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes maybe. They're way, way back in the pack.
Well, the one year I ran it, I waited until all the runners were off the bridge, and it was about 8 minutes before I got past the starting line. And that bridge does shake.
Well, now, the men will run on the right side, the runner's right side, going up the bridge in this early part of the race. The women and the male rookies will be running on the left. They will be divided. In a matter of a couple of miles, they will rejoin each other and come back together. But look at that. There is the classic sight. Start of the New York City Marathon of 1984. The buses left downtown starting at 5:30 this morning. So these people have been out there better than 5 hours, some of them just waiting for the start. It was not cold this morning. Usually it's cold out there in the early morning. Well, here we have number 503. 503 taking the lead. We're going to look him up. He is not one of your elite runners, but there's always somebody knows they're going to get on camera.
Well, he's not a winner, a potential winner. We call him a wiener. He's a guy that goes out and takes the lead and hot dogs it for the camera.
There's Gary Finelli in his ghost suit, and he's got his Ghostbusters music blaring from the machine, hanging from the front of him there. So you saw him. Angel Hernandez of Mexico, number 503, is the leader of the New York City Marathon. The first leader, no doubt not the last.
This is a perfect view of the division of the elite men on the left there, and the women. It's run with the first-time men, and as you said, once they get off the bridge, they divide routes and meet back up. But the course is, I mean, the technical background of measuring a course is very, very complicated. We'll get in more of the course later.
Well, there's a look at the elevation. This is not a flat course. You might think so through the streets of New York, but there are a number of hills. The biggest one, really, the one they think of as the heartbreak hill of this marathon is going up the Queensboro Bridge, but that's a long way from right now.
But this is a tough one to get up. You've been standing out there for many, many minutes. If you're not an elite runner, your legs are tight, and then you have to run up that hill with so much nerves. Grete has already taken an incredible lead. Not only has she lost the other women, but usually there are some men who try and stick with her, and I think this is a great indication of what she might have on her mind. I was waiting to see what she would do in those early miles.
I agree. Grete said before that she's ready, speed-wise, to run a very good marathon, but she was going to be somewhat cautious because of the heat, and she must feel terrific right off to take off that kind of a lead. I'm surprised she didn't sort of juggle in the pack. We may see, astonishingly, a very good time from her today.
You saw them picking up the clothing at the start. That was not just debris and leftovers. That was the people's clothing. They wear something out there in the early morning. They obviously discard it. That will be put into trucks, taken back to the finish line where they can claim it. If they wish to donate it to charity, they can do that also. So they will see their clothing again. 133 has taken the lead. Again, we'll have to look him up for you. But that's Jan Erik Viholmen of Norway. The Norwegian has taken the lead, so we have Norwegians leading both the men's and the women's division at the moment. The woman is expected to be the leader still at the finish line. This man is not.
I wouldn't be ready to call him a wiener, though. I think he is a legitimate marathoner, but for a Norwegian to go out in this humidity, unless he's been down in Florida or in Texas training, it's going to be very tough for him. I expected the Africans to make their way to the front in the first mile.
Another look at Grete Waitz, her fellow countryman, by the way, leading the men's race. Viholmen is 35 years old. The best he's done is 2:15:36. That wouldn't win this race.
As we take a look at the uphill grade you mentioned before, going toward the highest point in the race, many runners feel this isn't that fast, of course, because of some of the bridges and the uphill slow sections down in Brooklyn. But other people feel that that completely evens out because of the 2.5 million people on the sides of the streets bringing up your adrenaline. So the uphills may, you know, be discounted by the end.
Of course, Chicago, where they ran last Sunday, some of them did, none of these people, where other people ran, is almost an entirely flat course. They set a world's best time there.
I asked Rod Dixon that exact question. I said, isn't Chicago a lot faster? He said, well, technically it is, but the crowds here are unbelievable. In fact, he said, when I come down First Avenue, like last year when Jeff Smith was 50 yards ahead, he said the crowd is so loud and they're cheering for Jeff. By the time I got to them, they were a little quieter, and it was throwing my stride off. It was so loud. He said, once I got to where I was hearing the same cheering as Jeff Smith, he said, I felt like I could just pick it up. So he said, I came back here because of the crowds.
Again, the look from high overhead, from 700 feet above the waters of the entrance to New York Harbor. Incidentally, of the 6 Olympic medalists, men and women, in the marathon this year, just one of them is here. That's Grete Waitz, who won the silver medal in the women's race. 2 of them were in Chicago last Sunday, the winner of the men's race and the bronze medalist in the women's, and the other 3 are not participating in either race. So the race, the great race of New York City, is underway. There's a long way to go. Keep your breakfast at the set. Again, the misty shot from the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge, almost 18,000 runners making their way up and then down that slope again, then through the streets of Brooklyn for a long, long time before they head for Queens and Manhattan and the Bronx and back into Manhattan again. Let's take a look at the men's story. Number 133, Jan Erik Viholmen, the 35-year-old from Drammen, Norway, is still leading. We have Hernandez of Mexico right alongside of him. Number 503, he was the leader in the very early stages of the race. The split, Marty, 5:05. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's a pretty good split. bit because they were going uphill most of the way, but it's not as fast as in years past, and we really haven't seen any of the favorites get up as close. So as Bill mentioned, it looks like it's going to be a tactical race, a wait-and-see, cat and mouse, with Rod Dixon doing the stalking for most of the race.
Well, the women's race is no contest at this point. It is the favorite, Grete Waitz, going after her 6th victory in the New York City Marathon, way out in front of everybody, including the male runners who are running on the same side of the bridge as her, the first-timers. We've talked about motivation, about the crowd and that sort of thing. Grete doesn't seem to need motivation to run, but Marty did talk to her about that very subject.
Is your motivation the same as it was when you were 20 years old and still running on the track in Oslo?
No, not really, and that is the main problem that I have is the motivation and the problem with injuries. I must admit that I'm not so hungry now as I was when I was 20, and that's because I have achieved a lot, and I've achieved so much more than I have ever dreamt of.
Is there one thing that you could achieve where you could say that's enough, I can retire?
No, I don't feel that there is something that I have to achieve before I retire. As long as I enjoy what I'm doing, I will keep on running.
And there's a scene from right down the middle of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Normally, of course, traffic will be going one direction. They'd be going away from you on the right-hand side and coming towards you on the other side.
You might think that it's a disadvantage when we see Grete in the past there. She's running by herself already, alone, and you think that she's got to sort of pull everybody along with her. There she is. But once they do join up with that lead men pack, she won't be with the very leaders, but she will have a group of men, and she'll be able to pick up someone else's pace a little bit better. She's doing all this work alone now.
Last year, she was wearing white gloves at this point, which she didn't discard until Central Park South, shortly before the finish. But that was because it was a lot cooler, right?
A lot cooler, and she prefers the cool weather. She had told me and several people this week that she's very fit. She ran a very fast 5-kilometer race at Purdue University last week. She feels terrific. She's not afraid of anyone in the field here, but she was very afraid of the heat and the humidity, and here she is, doesn't look afraid at all to me. I don't think she's not only going for 6th place, it looks to me like she's going for a time. You'll see her last 4 marathons. She's a very consistent runner, obviously. As a matter of fact, the most consistent woman marathoner in history so far. Her LA performance, a reporter said something the other day at a press conference. Well, Grete, how about your failure in Los Angeles, meaning she didn't win the gold medal, and she was angry for the first time I've ever seen her be angry, and said, silver medal in the Olympic Games. What kind of failure was that?
Take a look at this. Red, white, and blue water spouts coming up from a New York City fireboat. I don't think they had that last year. That's kind of nice. A salute to the runners.
You saw Grete's slowest marathon of 2:28. She did win that marathon, so it wasn't that she even slowed down. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Diana, because I talked to her brother, because I've known Grete since she was about 17, and the people in Norway have felt, because she's been so great, that she cannot lose. And I asked her brother how they treated her when she got back, and he said the papers treated her as if she was a failure.
Really?
She is now considered a loser in Norway, and so it must be something that is on her mind. And she's going out, I think, to prove something today. The big question in my mind was, at 31 years old, a turning point in her career, was she going to buckle down and continue to sacrifice and go after records, or just enjoy the races?
That's it. Here we have Hernandez on the right from Mexico, and now Otis Sanders, as you saw, number 73 from Freeport, New York, has joined him as, well, really co-leader at this point.
And Otis has been the first New York finisher in this race before. He has been living on the West Coast for a couple of years now, and is a very good marathoner.
He's
but
done it
still, the strange thing is none of the favorites have worked their way to the front.
Otis Sanders, as you say, is a pretty good runner. He's done 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 1 second. That's not bad. But it, again, is not the kind of time that should win this race today. Off the bridge and into the streets, running just a little bit uphill. They'll have a bigger hill later on, the one up the Queensboro Bridge. That lies ahead. Over most of these ABC stations at 1:30 Eastern Time. He's going to have a subject, the CIA today. Senator Barry Goldwater, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, will be with him. Also, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York, vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee, along with 2 former directors of the CIA, Admiral William Stansfield Turner and William Colby. That's this week with David Brinkley, 1:30 Eastern Time, immediately following the marathon today. Again, that lovely shot of the fireboat in the red, white, and blue, and the stanchions of the bridge. By the way, the two stanchions are actually 1 3/4 inches further apart at the top than at the bottom, down under the water. The reason for that, it's so long, that bridge, they had to allow for the curvature of the earth when they built it. And of course, it is flexible. It does move a little bit as the runners are going along. Can you feel that when you're going over it, Marty? Did you notice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Feel a little vibration.
A little scary.
Right, now here are the leaders. Still none of the favorites in the race. We've got 6'12", Gabriel Escobil of Mexico. Otis Sanders, number 73, is back in 3rd place right now. We've got Hernandez, 5:03 of Mexico. And the pace, they ran a 4:45 second mile, Marty. What does that mean?
Well, it was downhill, so they did get a faster time. Interesting thing here, we're talking about Cinderella stories in the marathon. In the race right now, Otis Sanders, 73, 2 years ago was the first finisher from New York. And 55, Pat Peterson last year was the first finisher from New York. That's an important thing in the city here, but it's strange to see that battle taking precedence over the battle between the Rod Dixons, the Zach Baris, the Gidmus Shahandas, who haven't shown to the front of the pack yet.
Okay, number 55 is in that group, by the way. Peterson is also in it from Ronkonkoma, New York. We talked about big business in the marathon at the beginning of our program. Let's take a little deeper look at that subject. Jim Lampley has done the piece for us. A book came out by Fred Lebo this week saying, yes, money is paid above the table. Well, let's find out more about it.
Even as he ran the Coliseum lap of his Olympic marathon victory in Los Angeles, Carlos Lopez was aware he had won more than just a gold medal. In the world of big-time road racing, the identity of Olympic champion now opens the door to thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in appearance fees, expenses, reimbursements, and prize money. It's a luxury which has been available to past champions and high finishers in the most publicized of all marathons, New York. In a recently published book on the inside business of road racing, New York race organizer Fred Lebo revealed he had begun paying under-the-table money to runners as far back as 1977. By 1983, liberalized amateur eligibility rules allowed him to do so in the open. But this, as we know, is 1984. Suddenly, it's a brave new world.
This year, the climate changed dramatically as a result of the aggressive and expensive effort on the part of race organizers here in Chicago to attract as many of the world's top marathon runners as possible to this race just 1 week before New York.
The money behind Chicago comes from the coffers of the Food and Consumer Company, which has emerged as one of America's largest corporations, Beatrice. Their emissary in the sport is Bob Bright, the Fred Lebo of Chicago. And what does Beatrice want?
Well, my mandate is to put on the best marathon in the world, and I feel obliged to do that.
Carlos Lopez got $35,000 to race in Chicago last week. In all, Bright says he spread $150,000 in appearance fees among runners like 1983 New York runner-up Jeff Smith, world marathon champion Rob DiCastella, Olympic women's bronze medalist Rosa Mota, and dozens of others. The result was serious damage to the marquee value of the New York race. And it happened at a time when Fred Lebo's ability to compete is being restricted by politics. Having read the revelations in Lebo's book, New York Mayor Edward Koch says the marathon can no longer be treated with the attitude of public benevolence which helped it to flourish. For every dollar he now gives to runners, Lebo must also give $1 to the city of New York.
We believe, and so do sponsors of the event, that the city ought to share in the dollars. Heretofore, we've received half of the television fees. That was $50,000 that we got. And now they're going to give us dollar for dollar for the prize monies, etc. So we will be receiving about $300,000 towards the total expenditure of more than $600,000 that we will be providing.
It's a tough position for Lebo, but one in which he is not without some weapons. The New York Roadrunners Club is a thriving business, and some contend that Lebo, if he wanted to, could certainly compete dollar for dollar with Chicago. He contends he won't, and he shouldn't have to.
The winning of the New York City Marathon is tantamount to winning Wimbledon in the value of appearances, advertising, and promotions. And that's where a runner with a business sense looks for that, because the upfront money is just not enough. That's a one-shot deal. They must remember they make a living out of their sport. And it's not just how fast you run, it's also where you run that matters.
But the man who was a champion 4 times in New York says Lebo must pay more appearance money to more different runners.
If you have a man like Carlos Lopez, he's a gold medalist. He's going to bring a lot to your race. You have to pay him for that, not only for the excellence that he might achieve in that particular race, you know. You have to pay him for his celebrity status a little bit.
It's a viewpoint shared for different reasons by road racing's most powerful agent. A majority of the marathoners who command significant money are represented by Drew Mearns of Cleveland's International Management Group.
Our objective, as unpopular as it is to race directors and maybe even as unpopular as it is for us to say to one of our individual clients, is to tell them, you know, you got to take the $10,000, $15,000, $60,000 appearance fee. Think of your family, think of your wife, you know, think of the future, and think of the possibility that you might lose.
It was Drew Mearns who delivered Jeff Smith and Rob DiCastella to Chicago this year. He says it could have been different.
I think Fred had the ability to control this. It was a difficult decision, but he should have made the decision to pay appearance money, and he would have gotten, people would have accepted less appearance money. Our clients specifically would have accepted less appearance money to run New York than to run Chicago.
So the battle lines are now clearly drawn in this tale of two cities. Next year, the two races may be run on the same day. Fred Lebo will continue to emphasize New York's status. It's huge crowds lining the world's most famous streets, the prestige he believes New York alone can bestow upon its champion.
Runners with a business sense will know the value of the New York City Marathon. You mentioned marquee value. Now, I'll just say a couple of runners that won the Chicago Marathon the last couple of years, like Enzao and Craig Meyer, compared their marquee values to Rod Dixon, Bill Rogers, and Alberto Salazar.
I think the writing's on the wall here, and that's this, that pretty much like Steve Jones did in this marathon, once you get your nose in front, you turn on the speed, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And the speed doesn't necessarily mean dollars. It just means I'm going to work harder, I'm going to be tougher, I'm going to be relentless. And if he wants to go up against that, so be it.
Well, meanwhile, at Central Park awaits the leader many hours, or a couple of hours from now, in this race. I, for one, first of all, am very glad to see that the money is on top of the table. Of course, Marty, we have known for a long time that the money was there. Now it's on top of the table. I think that's a good thing. On the other hand, I think it's important to point out that the money only goes to 20 people, and there are 17,800 people in the race. There's still a lot of true amateurism in this particular race.
Well, there certainly is, and the top runners should be professional, and some of the things that they're not talking about is the appearance fee should be done away with. If we're going to be professional athletes like golfers and tennis players, you should not get appearance fees. You should be paid for how you compete on that day. That's the only thing that's fair to the fans. And the other thing is, why should a top runner have to choose between these two races and only do one? Why can't they be spaced out over the year so that we could have a triple crown, for instance, New York, Boston, and Chicago? And it'll be a year or so before this gets worked out. The sport is just blossoming and growing and going through some growing pains.
Okay, let's get back to the race right now. We have Pat Peterson still on the right as co-leader in the race, along with Terry Baker. Pat Peterson, former Manhattan College runner. But where is Rod Dixon? Well, there he is. There is the defending champion, heavy favorite in this race, number 2, wearing the all-black of his native New Zealand, won this race coming on with a sprint in the last 300 yards last year. He's in the second pack, in 13th place technically, but in the second group, about 100 yards or so behind the leader. Grete Waitz, meanwhile, in the women's group, still is well out in front of any other women. Some of the men who like to get in the picture for a while, and they're entitled to do that, are up with her now, but no woman. So there is Grete Waitz, the favorite, going for her 6th here. Another look at the course. They're in Brooklyn now. They'll be along 4th Avenue for about 6 miles. I would think, Marty, when you're on a straight stretch like that, with the Williamsburg Bank building in view for many, many miles, must be a tendency to speed up and say, gee, well, I never reached that thing. Well, okay, let's take a break and come back and discuss that. For a few years, right, as to whether the wheelchair guys could be in the race. Yeah. Back again at the New York City Marathon. There they are, coming down 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. I mentioned earlier that the troops of General Howe in 1776 massed at Fort Wadsworth and made their way across the water. Well, here is where most of the Battle of Long Island was fought. It was not a good battle for the Americans. Eventually, they were pushed against their backs to the river, to the East River, whereupon General Howe said, well, things are going pretty well. Let's knock it off, have a party, and we'll wipe these people up in the morning. During the night, the Americans escaped with Gloucester fishermen rowing them across, and they got to the island of Manhattan, eventually ended up in a place called Valley Forge. Here is the New York City Marathon route in the year 1984, mile 6 that they are on right now. By the way, we have the splits on 4 miles. They were going at a 2:09:45 pace. The 4th mile was done in 4:52. That's the men, Marty, of course.
That's right, and they have now passed the 5th mile, 4:56. So they're averaging 4:57.
Okay, well, right now, Bill Rogers is in a van, moving along, bumping up and down a little bit over the bumps and the potholes of Brooklyn. Let's get a report from Bill Rogers.
Okay, Jim, I'm not surprised by anything I see so far in this race. There are a couple of men. They're both good road runners, Terry Baker. The other fellow's the Q12 marathoner who's much longer.
Bill, I'm afraid that that siren is overriding you.
Gideon Shahango of Tanzania, and Bobby Hodge of Boston, and Mike and Dave Murphy of England are all in good position. I think that there's nothing unusual going on with the course. With the race pace so far, with the 2 leaders being out in front, that seems to be standard. I think that the weather is becoming difficult. This is going to be, as I said at the start of the race, a strategic kind of race. Dixon is hanging back. He's not going to show his cards until the last minute. I think he's in good position.
You surprised that...
Larry.
Well, go ahead. We're going to go over to Larry Rawson right now, Bill. Thank you for your report. Larry Rawson in a motorcycle sidecar with the women's race. How's that going right now, Larry?
Jim, this has been a fascinating start. Grete has just thrown caution to the wind. The 3-mile time was 16 minutes and 45 seconds. She hit the 4-mile mark at about 22 minutes and 15 seconds, and she just passed 5 miles at around 27:30. She is right on 5 minutes and 30 seconds pace for the per mile for the first 5. I should add here, after the first mile, the pace and the slope of the course will be fast because we dropped from 276 feet of elevation down almost to about 50 feet within 6 miles. Now, I'm going to add this. If this sun continues to come out and the cloud cover burn off, the finish line is going to look like a war zone. She is running very comfortably and smoothly right now. Back about 100 yards behind her, Laura really Foley is in 2nd place. And in 3rd place is Laura Albers. Jim?
Hey, thank you very much, Larry, and hold on fast. We don't want to lose you there off that sidecar. Diana, do you think that conceivably in the back of her mind might be the fact that she let Joan Benoit get away from her in the Olympic marathon, and she just wants to go out there and, well, she's really running a race very much like Joan's in Los Angeles?
Joan Benoit, I'm sure, is buried way, way back in her mind. I think she's mentioned that she does want to meet her again in a marathon, but right now, I doubt it. She feels the sun coming out. We can see it here, and with an 18-second lead, it's about 100 yards. That could feel comfortable, but as Larry just mentioned, when you have heat on a day like this, even to an experienced woman like Grete, a lot of torturous things can happen to you, along a 2-hour, 20-minute run. She's at a very fast pace, though. When you talk about, running a 2:26 pace in the first 3 miles, Marty, she's not taking the same tactic as the men. No caution whatsoever.
No, she's grabbing her hamstring.
Wondering about that, huh? Or was it just adjusting her running shorts? I couldn't be sure about that, but it's something we'll keep in mind. Fred Lebo, the man who really started this race 14 years ago, president of New York Roadrunners, riding up in front. That's where he does it every year. He's the director of the race. The race is run under the auspices of the New York Roadrunners Club. Alan Steinfeld is the race director, and what a job he has to do every year. But now back to the men's race. We still have Terry Baker and Pat Peterson running in front.
Well, Terry Baker on the left there in the red just entered the race this week. He has not run a marathon, but as Bill mentioned, he is a very good road runner, and he could run a good one. I think his stride's a little too bouncy for a marathoner right now. He gets a lot of movement up and down, and that tells in the last miles. Pat Peterson, of course, is not someone who is a textbook case either. You see him going back and forth, but they are both proven. There's Grete again grabbing it. It's not a piece of clothing she's adjusting. A downhill stretch. If you've got problems with your hamstring, a downhill stretch is where it's going to bother you, because you've got to stretch that hamstring out just a little bit farther.
Well, we remember last year, of course, Rod Dixon was doing the same thing and did it for many, many miles. Eventually, he seemed to run through it and won the race.
You can work it out. There is really no reason why Grete should be cramping this early in the race unless she came into the race with the trace of an injury. Rod worked through it, and that's what Grete is trying to do right now. Of course, on a hot day like today, you might expect people people to get those cramps at the 22-mile mark.
Grete is somewhat controversial on the subject also. I mean, before she jumped on the reservoir for a training run the other day, someone said, aren't you going to stretch? She said, well, a dog doesn't stretch before it runs, does it?
But a cat does.
Well, in any case, you know, many of them believe in a 2-hour-long yoga-type stretching period during the day, and she is to the contrary of that. Especially on a warm day, she may not have felt that she needed any stretching whatsoever. But we're going to have to keep a track on whether she grabs that leg or not. Let me mention real quickly that Rosa Mota was third in the Olympic Games this year. She won Chicago last year, and we won't see her today. Last week. She's back in the pack running with her boyfriend. Just a week ago, she won a marathon in her best time, 2:26+, and now she's just going to jog along today. Some kind of shape she's in.
I would say so. Grete Waitz, though, running a fast pace, apparently having some kind of a problem with her left thigh, with the hamstring. So it's going to be a fascinating story. But here comes the favorite, the defending champion for the men, Rod Dixon. Look at that personal best, 2:08.59. And the man who says he loves the crowds on the sidewalks of New York. Well, they're growing now as they run along 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. It's a big, wide street. They say that you can't hear them, you don't feel quite as enveloped by the crowds at this point as you do later on when the streets get narrower. Pat Peterson's still the leader in the race, as you saw. Pat actually finished 29th in this race last year, so, you know, he's not somebody not to be concerned about at all. Pat ran in 2:12.06 last year.
That's right. He was the 5th American, and he could improve down to the 2:10 range in 1 year and be the factor at the end.
Okay, well, there you see the leaders. Grete all by herself, and the front run, look at that.
Cramp.
Sort of in her, stomach muscles that time it looked like. We'll be back. There's another high look at the field in the New York City Marathon. The men's story developing as expected with Rod Dixon biding his time, but the women's story kind of dramatic already. There is Rod in the all-black, as we said, of his native country of New Zealand. They almost always wear that, even on hot days. And, of course, black is about the hottest thing you could wear on a day like this when the sun comes out. And there is Gidima Shahanga of Tanzania, another of the favorites. He led the race last year, the man in the white shirt with the red stripe across the front. They are 18 seconds behind the current leaders. That's not too bad, not a problem for them at the moment. The 6-mile split, they went 4:43 on the 6th mile, Marty. They're going at a 2:08.30 pace. That's pretty fast.
They have picked it up.
Okay, Marty talked to Rod Dixon yesterday, I believe it was. Talked to him about strategy in the race. Let's hear what he had to say.
How is your strategy different this year than it was last year? You came in as one of the many favorites last year, but now you are the favorite. You are in the position Salazar and Rogers before him was in. How does that change your strategy in the race?
I think I'm a lot more sure in my own mind and a lot more confident in my own mind, having run successfully in '83. I think, if anything, I like to be the favorite because I know that I can prove people that I am the favorite, and I was rightly chosen as the favorite. I've trained well, I've got confidence in my own ability, and I'll just go out there, and if I strike it right, they won't catch me.
Okay, and there he is in the streets of Brooklyn. A long way from his New Zealand home, but as we said a couple of times, he loves it here in New York. There are the leaders, though, Terry Baker and Pat Peterson. Pat Peterson on the right, number 55 from Manhattan College, right here in New York. The pace, as we said, very fast right now on this course as it winds through Brooklyn down the long, long straightaway of 4th Avenue, about 6 miles long, which goes to the Williamsburg Bank Building. They're nearing that now. They'll go around that and then into a different part of town where you'll see some trees and narrow streets for the first time. But these are the leaders. The pace, as we said, at a 2:08.30 pace, the 6th mile in 4 minutes, 43 seconds. Terribly fast. They've got to burn themselves out, don't they?
I'm not ready to make a bet on it, but this is what Rod Dixon talks about as far as confidence. He's got the confidence to hang back, take into account what the heat is, and run his own race and not panic when somebody gets that far ahead.
Okay, the women's race now, we're told, is going at a 5:23 average, and there is Grete Waitz, again, sort of hitching up her running shorts. It looks like she's not really touching her body. It's more like maybe the clothing is bothering. I don't know which.
We're trying to get a word from Larry Wasson on the field, but I mean, you'll never know from Grete's style or her face if she's got a problem. She looks like a puppeteer, has strings attached to the elbows and
there she goes again.
face, but she's constantly touching her shorts, pulling in the front and the back, and you know, we may have something like a diarrhea problem.
The runner's nightmare.
Okay, well, Grete Waitz running on, as you see. You can't tell anything from her face or her running style. We'll know more possibly when we come back. Leaders at this point, Peterson and Baker still out in front. Hernandez of Mexico, another Mexican, Jose Gomez. That's not the Gomez that 2 years ago made a very good showing in this race. Then Gidemus Shahanga of Tanzania and Rod Dixon of New Zealand. Those are two very important runners. One, of course, the defending champion. The women, Grete Waitz all by herself at the moment, but having problems of some sort. Then Laura Follier in second place. Véronique Marot, who runs from England, was born in France. Then Laura Albers. And back in the pack a little bit here is Gabriela Anderson-Schiess. Remember the name? She was the lady in the Olympic Games who had the terrible problem. Took her 5 minutes to complete the final lap. Running again today, a competitive runner at age 39. But remember how it was in L.A.?
It is not her legs that are gone. It is her mind now that is gone. If this was a fight, it would be stopped, and someone should take responsibility and walk out there and grab her and pay the consequences if half the world wants to say it was wrong.
You know, it's a pity on Gabrielle Anderson here because probably she'll never run well after this again. We've seen that people who have heat exhaustion like this really can't come back after it.
Incredibly, I suppose the acknowledgement to the crowd, up went the right hand.
In 1954, they let Jim Peters struggle through this in Vancouver, and they said he was never the same again. As you know, your run has caused a lot of controversy over whether runners should be pulled if they get into problems with heat in a marathon. You're kind of in the center of that, and I said at the time that I thought that you should have been stopped. I'm looking back at it now. Do you think a runner in that condition should be stopped? Do you think that you should have been stopped at the Olympics?
For me personally, I don't think I was in that critical a stage that it was necessary to stop me from a medical standpoint out, because I think all the doctors said they were watching me closely, and they said that it was quite sure that it wasn't anything real dangerous. And you know, I recovered so quickly, so I mean, I was happy with what they decided on. And looking back now, when I came into the stadium, that some of the officials sort of came toward me, but I didn't think of any that I was in danger, or you know, sort of judging if, well, should I pull out because it might be dangerous. That wasn't in my mind at all. It was mostly just running that far, and it's the Olympics, and seeing the finish right there. I think that's really what carried me to get over these last few yards.
Here in New York, there's water all along the course, but in the Olympics, there's only a water station every 3 miles. Do you think that was one of the reasons why you got so dehydrated?
It could have, especially if the temperatures are that high and the humidity that high as it was in LA. And that's one thing here in New York, that even at the last couple miles, if you get in trouble like I did in LA, I hope I will be able just to get some water from the spectators or from some tables. And, you know, even if worst comes to worst, you can probably stop and drink it and take your time. And it's not like in the Olympics where you have to be careful what you do so you don't get disqualified.
You've had some months now since the race. Are there any lasting effects?
No, nothing at all.
No problem.
No.
Well, no lasting effects so far either. She's running along very well. just 3 months, almost to the day, Diana, from her terrible experience in Los Angeles. Quite remarkable that she's out there running so well.
Yes, I have to say that I'm sort of half and half with Marty on this subject. I think in extreme endurance sports, long-distance swims and cycling events, sometimes the athlete loses control of their muscular coordination, but they really are right. I mean, you saw on the Olympic track there, she had the presence to even shoo away officials. She wanted to finish, and she had that much presence of mind. But one thing I very much agree with, you've suggested, and that is introduce something like a checking system. Have someone run out. What is your name? You know, do you know where you are? And if they're that cognizant, I mean, the body recovers. She could have actually passed out there. She looked worse than she was. If the body can't go on, it won't.
But I know basically you subscribe to the theory, don't you, that if it's time to stop, your body's going to make you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that if she had passed out on the track there, and it sounds like a cruel thing to say, I think she would have recovered as quickly as she did when she finished. And now she finished the Olympic marathon, and I don't think anyone else should have made that decision for her, you know, to take her out. And here she is, ironically, on another hot day. By the way, the Olympics were not the only time that she's had trouble. She's come like that to the end of 10Ks before, so she should pick cool races.
Okay, well, now we're over with the men again, and there is Rod Dixon, the favorite in the race. Gabriella Anderson, she's wearing the hat. She'll be easy to spot as we go along. Now they're in mile 10. It's 26 miles, 385 yards before they finish at the Tavern in the Green in Central Park. A look at some of the spectators. We're going to try to do more of that as we go along. See the balloons that the kids have brought. People shouting encouragement, and they will be. This is the most important point almost about this race. They'll be on the sidewalks and shouting to the runners almost until the last ones go through many hours from now. They don't go home right after the leaders go through. There you see the streets still sort of glistening and damp, but it's not raining. The sun is trying to come through. It's getting hotter and, if anything, more humid all the time. Terry Baker, 104 on the right, is the leader, along with 55, Pat Peterson. Jose Gomez is a bit behind them. Still on 4th Avenue. Moving off it just now. Central Park awaits. A long way ahead. After 9 miles, they're running at a 2:09.45 pace. The last split, Marty, was 5 minutes and 7 seconds, slowing down. Terry Baker and Pat Peterson still the leaders. Jose Gomez, you see, behind them in 3rd place. And now Rod Dixon, the favorite, is 23 seconds behind.
Well, they're both capable of running 2:09.47 if they have a breakthrough race and they're going after it. It's a matter of whether the heat is going to get to them. I think they're kind of astonished themselves that the pack has let them go. Jose Gomez just behind them was with Alberto Salazar to the 18-mile mark a few years ago, but then faded to 36th place. So you see that Rod Dixon and Gidima Shahanga are not making any mistake right now by hanging back off the pace.
They figured it out to precise yards. I don't know how we do that, but we did it. 132 yards behind the leader is Rod Dixon, so well within striking distance. And the day out there must be getting more brutal all the time. The sun beginning to shine, the humidity still up around 90%. It's nothing like October in New York is supposed to be. It's like an August day here. Women's pace, by the way, after 7 miles, the latest we have, going at a 2:25.15 pace, Diana. Grete Waitz still leading. Foye still second, and Marot is 3rd.
Grete is now almost a full minute over Laura Foye of Italy, and a minute for her at this pace means about 300 yards. A minute 25-second lead. I've just had an update. So we're talking about 400 yards a quarter mile. And Marty, I don't know about you, but she doesn't seem to be hanging on to the shorts the last couple of miles. I don't see any problems with Grete cruising in. It's just a matter if she wants to pick it up and really go down in the low to, you know, close to 225.
Did you notice the people handing out cups of water? That was not an official water stop. Those were just spectators. Other ones clapping and just calling to the people and urging them on. Some of them still going around the Williamsburg Bank building as they head into quieter streets, as we say. Big crowds, but quiet streets with trees. Much more residential neighborhood than you see right there. I wonder if we can get Larry Rawson on his motorcycle. Larry, do you hear me out there?
Jim, I can hear you.
Okay, what's the deal with Grete? We see her going to her shorts, to her stomach. You got any ideas? Can you hear me? Apparently not. A little trouble. You see Larry on his motorbike back there, but it's not the picture we have a problem with. It is the audio right now. How's she look to you, Danny? It looks like the normal Grete Waitz.
As I said before, you know, the arms are held high, the shoulders swing at a very smooth cadence, but she's got that pack of Kleenex in the left hand there, and she keeps, you know, dabbling everywhere with it, and I haven't had a report of what the problem is. There she's put it back in her shorts again. And she's just looking a little bit troubled. She's been talking to someone off the side of the race, too, pointing to her stomach. Here she's adjusting her shorts again. I hope that we can open up Larry's audio and get an immediate report from him.
Larry, let's try you once again. You hear me, Larry? Larry Rawson. I think he's talking, but we don't have his mic open. We can't get his mic open right now. He was trying. At any rate, Grete Waitz appears to have what might be an embarrassing and a very physical problem out there in the race course.
This is not that unusual. Joan Benoit had the same problem just before the Olympics. In fact, in the Olympic marathon, Joan Benoit had a little vial of a prescription drug in case she started to get diarrhea during the race. And this happens. It could be a case of nerves. It's a case of the travel coming from Norway. In fact, Bill Rogers told us last night that Lasse Viren, when he ran in the New York Marathon, requested a private porta-toilet at the start just for him. And he had it on the other side of the bridge. He used that, and then he would jog to the starting line. There's Dave Murphy of England, one of the Englishmen hoping to pull an upset.
There's a look at the neighborhood. You can see into residential territory here. The ladies out, one with a baby in a carriage there. A man with a build not made for marathoning. He was hanging out over the curb there a little bit. Lots of babies along the course, it appears, but a little bit quieter here than they were on 4th Avenue. It depends on the neighborhood. Some neighborhoods are quiet, some are noisy. The women's 8-mile pace would be 2:25:06 marathon, but the split was 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, does that say anything to you at all, Diana?
That means she's even picked it up. From the 6th mile to the 8th mile, she's now not on a 2:26 pace, she's on a 2:25 pace. So she's got a problem, some sort of diarrhea or something. It certainly hasn't affected her run whatsoever.
Okay, the race goes on. We're in New York. Still in the streets of Brooklyn, we're back in our ABC Marathon Control. I'm Jim McKay with Diana Nyad and Marty LaQuarrie. What do the two of you think of the race so far, as opposed to what you thought before it began, men's division?
Well, I thought the first part of the race would belong to the Africans, Shahanga and Barry. I thought they would go out and set the pace for the first 10 miles. Then I thought the Englishmen, there are about 5 good Englishmen, would come up, take it during the middle of the race, and then I was thinking Dixon would be there at the finish, but it's been the Americans who have gone out and pushed the pace. They've run under 2:10 pace, very good pace. Terry Baker entered at the last minute, and I kind of have an inkling now that maybe he was put in there to just set the pace for the first 10 or 15 miles and keep it honest.
A rabbit, if there's such a thing as a rabbit in a 26-mile race.
It has been known.
Pat Peterson, however, who's been up with the leaders, could be a more serious contender. And now we've got Jose Gomez taking the lead from Mexico.
Well, Gomez is a legitimate. He stuck with Alberto Salazar for the first 18 miles 2 years ago, but then, as I said, he faded to 36th. So he's legitimate, but Rod Dixon is not worried about him at this point. Rod is hanging back with Shahanga, Barry, and the Englishman, who he considers to be his top competition.
Okay, Diana Nyad, what about the women's race?
Well, of course, we're all waiting word, as soon as we can get in touch with Larry Rawson, as to a definitive word on what's happening with Grete pulling up the shorts. But it just occurred to me for the first time as I watched Grete today, she reminds me a great deal of Chris Everett Lloyd. She's quiet and reticent and respectful, and she comes to the press conferences a week ahead of time and does what everybody wants for her. And she gets out and builds this long, you know, we might wind up with a decade's worth of great performances from Grete Waitz. Every time I watch her, I don't see anything, you know, dramatic and spectacular, but I respect her more and more every stride she takes.
Always annoys me when people will say somebody is colorless simply because they don't cause trouble, because she's a decent person. Grete Waitz, one of the great women athletes of the world. Let's take a look at the map right now to see approximately where we are over this long 26-mile, 385-yard course. They've done that long 6-mile stretch down 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. They're now taking some twists and turns through residential neighborhoods, I believe just around the Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. Then they'll be going into Queens when they go over the Pulaski Bridge. That'll be the halfway mark in the race. Now here are just some of the 17,000, almost 18,000 runners on the course, many of them for the first time, each with their own personal goals, personal motivations, and the people on the side, as we said, it's always a very interesting phenomenon to see how they help. But this is an official water stop here. These are volunteer people handing them the water. And here is Linda Down. Or no, that's not Linda, excuse me. No, this is an amputee we see right now. a gentleman named Cruz, going over the Queensboro Bridge. Now, the disabled people started at just after 7:30 this morning, a little over 2 hours before the regular field of runners. There's a whole club of them now, the Achilles Track Club. We'll talk about that a little more as we go on. But one of the disabled runners going over the bridge right now. Donna DeVerona is at one of the watering spots. Donna?
Jim, thank you. We're right here at Fort Greene, South Oxford Street, Brooklyn, and this is the scene of your average participant. You've got thousands of volunteers lining the street. All of these young kids have practiced in learning how to hand out the cups, but as the runners come through, they've got to be careful because it's very slippery. The water cups are wet, and by the time the end of the day, this one water station only will have handed out 20,000 cups right here. That means that 500,000 cups will be handed out by the end of the day by the time they pass all the water stations. There are more water stations in this New York Marathon. During the Olympics, there was an allowance of so many. Here, there were 13, and Fred LeBeau, because of the feat, added 2 more. This is the 8.5-mile mark, and there are very few people who have not accepted water from the over 100 volunteers at this one station only. Now, back to you, Jim.
Okay, Donna, somebody's going to have to pick up all those cups you saw littering the street over there in Brooklyn. Another good shot of humanity in action. There they are. The split for the men at 11 miles. They're going to 2:10 exactly pace now. The last mile at 5:05. And there is the leader, Jose Gomez of Mexico. He's stretching it out a little bit now. Could this be his effort, Marty, right now to try to...
Well, you have to think that since he made this mistake once in life, went out, led the race, or was close to the leaders, that he wouldn't do it again unless he thinks he can pull it off this time. For 3 years, he has been thinking about that moment of truth that he had on First Avenue, and he's going to go back, push it again, and hope that this time he doesn't fade.
Of course, 2 years ago was his very first marathon of his life when he put it out a little bit too fast. He's 28 years old now, in the prime of his life, really, for a marathoner. Maybe he's ready.
He has had some Olympic experience, so I would say if he's leading at 20 miles, then Rod Dixon, Shahanga, those people have to get very serious about cutting him down.
Okay, he did the last mile in exactly 5 minutes. They're now at a 2:10:15 pace. Gomez now followed by Pizzolato of Italy and Pat Peterson. Much more to come. Behind that pole that's in the way with the white, just standing up there with the white T-shirt, she is a member of the Achilles Track Club. She is trying to become the first woman amputee ever to complete the full course in the New York City Marathon. Patty Rossback of the Achilles Track Club. The Achilles Club itself is quite a story. All of the disabled, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, started about a little more than 2 hours before the big pack. This was the start. This is our videotape of the start of the disabled just after 7:30 this morning. There's Linda Down, I believe, the cerebral palsy victim. There she is, starting out at 7:30. It's quite a story. No one who saw it will forget the courageous ordeal of Linda Down, the cerebral palsy victim who stayed the course for 11 hours 2 years ago and finished in darkness. Later, the sun shone on her as she was honored at the White House with winners Alberto Salazar and Grete Waitz. Linda's a member of the Achilles Track Club for the disabled only. Formed 2 years ago with 3 members, it now has 70, with 13 of them competing in today's race. There are blind members and stroke victims and amputees, and it all sprang from the mind of 43-year-old Dick Traum, a company president and an amputee himself for 19 years. In 1976, when he first ran the New York race, he was the first amputee ever to complete a full marathon in about 7.5 hours. However, another later performance by an amputee inspired him to form the Achilles Club.
I would go to Toronto to help fundraising for Terry Fox Day. This is a individual amputee who was inspired by me and ran across Canada and raised approximately $30 million for cancer research. And while there were many people who had different disabilities who participated in the 10-kilometer races. And I felt that if they're doing it in Toronto, we could certainly do it here.
Tim O'Connor of Brooklyn is competing in his first marathon today. He's been blind for 3 years. However, he's an all-round athlete, a brown belt in judo, a green belt in karate. The idea and the work of the Achilles Club is his consuming interest these days.
It's like one family. We're all very close together. We get to know one another and we help one another out, you know, learn each other's different ways and how we could help each other.
Pat Griskus is a marvel. He started the race at the regular time this morning, will probably finish in about 3.5 hours. Why is that so remarkable? Well, Pat, who has run 7 marathons and 1 Ironman triathlon, lost his left leg below the knee 17 years ago.
I was a miler in high school, and I'd had a fairly successful career, if you want to call it that. I think I finished second in one dual meet, and I won every other race I was ever in. The good thing about the club, I think, is that it affords not only me but a lot of other people with disabilities a chance to get together and in strength, in numbers or strength sometimes, I think, and and with everybody's mutual encouragement, everybody's able to do much better than they would by themselves.
But the saga of Linda Down remains in the front of the mind. Last year, she lowered her time by about 3 hours. She hopes her story inspires not only the disabled, but all people.
I hope that I've done something positive for the image of disabled people. I think I have. I don't know. Sometimes you don't know what the effect is you have until long after a time has passed. But also I think it is something very positive for people in general, because everyone has a disability that they carry around with them. It's just not always visible. And sometimes seeing someone who happens to be disabled do something like this helps somebody who is able-bodied look at themselves differently. So I think it does help all people.
In the streets of Brooklyn. As we said, 12 members of the Achilles Club out there and other disabled people along with them. There are wheelchair athletes also out there competing today. None of these people are competing for money. They're competing for themselves. Picking up a little water as he goes along the way. Let's get back to the up-front story because we have a new leader. Now, this is important. This is Orlando Pizzolato. He has just passed the halfway mark at a 2:10:06 pace. He is the leader. He could be serious. He's 26 years old. He ran the New York City Marathon last year in 2:15:28. He's done better since then. And could this, Marty, be the man they did not know?
This man could be for real. In fact, Franco Fava, a great steeplechaser from Italy, I saw him in the hotel, and he was just mentioning that it was so hot in Italy this summer, and that the summer hasn't even ended. So this could be one person who is very well accustomed to heat. We also saw Jose Gomez up there, who trains in Mexico, and it has probably come out of hot weather. So this weather is not bothering him as much as the Englishmen who are back there in the pack. And Rod Dixon, I know, is very concerned about the heat. He's taking a gamble and being conservative. We had dinner last night. He had a number of beers, kept leaving the table because he had hydrated himself all day. He drank 6 large bottles of mineral water during the day. So he had so much water in him. He was definitely worried about the heat, and he is taking the gamble that this race cannot be won in under 2:10. He's running slower than that pace.
Okay, but now he's 300 yards behind. They have passed the halfway mark. Does he have to start really worrying now?
I'd say he has to start worrying in another 5 miles. He has to be mindful of not letting any more distance mount up than 300 yards at this point. But I'm not out there on the course with him. Rod could say, I feel horrible. He can look next to him and see Shahanga and say, he looks horrible, and say that man up front must be feeling bad and is probably going to drop.
Okay, there's a quick look at the women's leaders. Grete still well out in front, but apparently having a problem. Laura Foley in second place is a definite danger.
The 1984 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by...
The cries of water, water go out in the streets of Brooklyn. We're well back in the pack now, of course, among the almost 18,000 runners in the 1984 New York City Marathon. This is live coverage if you've just joined us. Jim McKay with Diana Nyad and Marty LaQuarrie in the studio. We have Bill Rogers, a 4-time winner of this race, out on a moving vehicle. And as a matter of fact, why don't we go to Bill Rogers right now? How's it looking, Bill? What about this fella, Pizzolato?
Okay, Jim, this is turning out to be anybody's race. I still think Dixon's in good position. Gadama Shahanga of Tanzania is running a smart race, better than he did last year. And Dave Murphy of England is on a roll. He's won twice here in New York this past year at major road races. But it's anybody's race. The guy from Italy looks good, too. We'll have to see a little later.
Okay. Okay, Bill Rogers out on the course on the moving vehicle. I think the quality of the field might be germane at this part, Marty, and people have been talking about the Chicago field last Sunday as opposed to the field today. They did have the winner of the gold medal in the men's marathon at the Olympic Games. On the other hand, some statistics here show that Chicago had 20 men in the race who have run under 2:12. Here there are 25 men who have run under 2:12. In the women, there were 16 in Chicago who have done under 2:40. Here in New York, 26. So the depth of the field here would seem to have more quality, and that could be germane as we move along here.
Well, as you mentioned, Jim, the money factor is only a factor to the very top runners. And as you move down to the, shall we say, merely world-class runners, the money doesn't decide where they go. And around the world, the New York Marathon is still the best known of marathons. And this is why the field is so much deeper when you get down to the 2:12 range. And those 2:12 range men, anyway, always have the capabilities of dropping 2 minutes in one race and being a winner. As Bill said, it's always funny. You can always come in as that guy from Italy or that guy from New Zealand, and you leave the New York Marathon as a household word, at least in running circles.
No question. Here is First Avenue awaiting them. This is we said at the beginning, is where the singles bars are and some very nice restaurants. This is where, the young people who have pretty good jobs in New York congregate on Friday and Saturday and Sunday nights, and even during the week. They're not in school anymore, of course. And they're congregated today on the sidewalks. The balloons being sold and vendors selling ice cream, all sorts of things. Some pretty good ice cream shops along this street, as a matter of fact, also. And the crowd grows and grows once you get into Manhattan. When you come off the Queensboro Bridge, they say it's almost like an explosion because there's been silence on the bridge itself where there's no traffic. And here is the leader getting ready to hear that explosion when he comes off the bridge. Running, they have the longest carpet in the world, they say, on this bridge. Because under it is metal, and the first time they ran all 5 boroughs, a lot of people got very bad cuts and blisters on their feet running over the bridge, so now it's carpeted.
That carpet is not only the longest, it's a brand new sort of development this year, and it's much stiffer than it's been in the past, and some of the people running the race director himself, has said that it's actually going to add some speed to the time of the race. It's stiffer and gives you a little more of a spring. It was on the Pulaski Bridge, it's on the 59th Street Bridge, on the Madison and Willis Avenue bridges also, so it's a little bit of help, and that grading, of course, in the very first few years was awful.
See, actually, he's just moving on to the carpet part now. That was the approach to the carpet. A red carpet. Seems to me it was green in the past. I'm not sure.
Red is brand new. You're right.
Well, these guys deserve, and these women deserve, the red carpet, if anybody does. As Orlando Pizzolato, the leader, the surprise leader of the men's division, makes his way across Queensboro. As he comes off, as we say, he'll make a 180-degree turn, and that's where the crowd, the wall of the crowd sound, will hit him. What a beautiful shot this is, as the sun finally is burning off that heavy fog that we had this morning. After 14 miles, gone at a 2:09.50 pace, at least Pizzolato is. He did that 14th mile in 5:03. In second place still Jose Gomez. In third place still Pat Peterson of the United States, not fading too much.
Oh, that's a great story. And First Avenue is a great place to be leading. There is so much encouragement there that it's not an effort mentally. And as that second pack comes off the bridge, they will be straining their necks to see how far behind they are. They, of course, have no idea that they're behind by 300 yards, as is the case with Rod Dixon, because you can't believe the spectators on the side. You get so many varying yells from them, 300 yards, 100 yards. So if Rod could see the picture that we see now, they know that this fellow may be for real. He looks very good. You come down First Avenue, some of it is downhill. It's very easy to run. Then you get into Central Park. The crowds are great there, but the hills are also there, and no matter how much the crowd is encouraging you, if you don't have the training in, you can't hold on in Central Park.
Well, now listen to this. Rod Dixon is now 1 minute and 14 seconds behind.
Well, it's Rod who has that problem of being behind, but actually it's all of the favorites, because Peterson is kind of a surprise to be up there for this long. But he is a New Yorker. You'd have to think that he knows this course, especially from here on in. One of the things that did Jeff Smith in a little bit last year with Rod Dixon was he got into Central Park. He didn't know the hills. There is something to be gained from training on those hills and knowing how hard to run to the crest of each of those hills, which affect affects your body differently.
Okay, here we have Pat Peterson in the white you saw there, and just behind him, closing in on him, I believe that's Mohammed Rudaginga of Tanzania and the University of Texas at El Paso. There is the course elevation profile. As we said, coming up the Queensboro Bridge there is, I guess, the second highest to the Verrazzano, but it affects you more, I would think, because at this point you've been running for a long, long time.
That's right. And so they're entering the flattest 5 miles or so that they're going to see for the rest of the race. This is where a lot of people have been able to stick with the Bill Rogers in the past, and they stuck with Alberto Salazar, but once they make the turn into the park, you've really got to have it. But Orlando looks very good. He seems to have a stride that's fitting for a marathoner. You see him shaking his head, much as Steve Jones did last week in Chicago. When you're looking around, taking in the scenery, you know that the running is coming easily to him. He's almost out there for a stroll. He's not stiff. His eyes are not focused straight ahead. It's not coming very hard to him yet.
Okay, you were looking at the leader, at Pizzolato, and then back to Peterson and Rudaginga.
Great shot of his lead.
One point here is that none of the runners will be able to take water during this entire mile across the bridge, and I guarantee you when they hit First Avenue, they're going to be looking very quickly. The experienced runners know that it's not just when you're thirsty that you need to take it. Marty talked earlier about hydrating before a race, even the day before, but during the race also, you need to continually drink even if you're not thirsty. The muscles need water flushing through them to contract efficiently.
I know one thing, Jim, that when Rod Dixon and some of the favorites come off of this bridge at 15 miles, that's where their friends will be, their personal friends, because you can watch the runners at the bridge, cut across, see them once in the park, and see them at the finish. So that's where knowledgeable people wait. And when they get off the bridge, someone will yell to them. Someone they trust will say, Rod, 400 yards, and he'll believe him, and he'll know he's in trouble.
Diana, Veronique Marot from York, England, born in France, has now taken over second place from Laura Fogli of Italy. The leader, of course, still Grete Waitz, going into 2:25:52 pace. Now in the streets of Manhattan comes the first man, the leader of the race, Orlando Pizzolato. And he's going to, right now, he is hearing sounds he has never heard before. He's only been in, I believe, 2 marathons in his life, and when he ran here before, he was well back in the pack.
I just have to laugh because last night, Rod Dixon and I and Barry Brown, our statistician, had to go to the same restaurant, Italian restaurant, that Rod Dixon went to last year. We had to have the same table, the same waiter, and the same meal, and the waiters must be having mixed emotions right now.
No question. You saw the balloons go up, by the way. That was to indicate that the first runner had entered the borough of Manhattan.
I'm sure this young man is remembering the Chicago race last week also. Steve Jones was an inspiration to people like Alberto, who I understand when Alberto Salazar finished his TV commentary, he left with his head down and his sneakers in his hand to go out for a run to try to get back in form. But this must be an inspiration for this young Italian, too.
Let's listen just for a moment to this crowd. They'll be hearing that all the way, and as just about all the runners say, anybody who's ever been in this, the crowd is a factor in the New York City Marathon. We're in the big town. Is Rod Dixon just taking it easy, 1 minute and 15 seconds behind? Or has Orlando Pizzolato of Italy gotten in a position to steal the New York City Marathon of 1984? Well, the temperature and humidity are going to be a major factor from this point on. 67 degrees, but look at the humidity, 88%. The wind almost non-existent. There's nothing to cool you off as you go. The weather's still overcast, but the sun beginning to burn through. As you said, Marty, this man knows heat, however. He's been in Rome all summer.
And one thing should be pointed out, Steve Jones, who set the world record last week, was a very established track runner. He was 8th in the Olympic Games, but Orlando has run a minute slower for 10,000 meters. He's 28:22 for 10,000 meters. Were he to win this, it's just about the biggest upset in a major marathon that I have seen. And Dixon has got to dig deep. He's in a big hole. He's not going to give up. It's not impossible, but you can see who looks better. But let me caution you, Rod always looks that way.
Well, remember last year, Dixon looked like he was near death. He was behind Jeff Smith as they came into Central Park with only a quarter of a mile to go. It looked like there was no way, and from somewhere, from the depths, he found a miler's kick and came on and won the race.
Right. This is a thing that Rod has. He's a slogger. You'll see. He's all strength. He doesn't come off the ground very much. He uses his arms a lot, but then he is able, at the end of a race, to get up on his toes and call on those years when he was a 3:53 miler and sprint at the end. But the Italian Orlando Pizzolato just looks fantastic. I can't imagine him doing what Jeff Smith did and dying in the last half mile, because Smith had a totally different style where he used his arms very much. He bounced up and down, and Orlando is very conservative with his motions. He just looks fantastic.
Isn't that a gorgeous shot of the piled buildings of the borough of Manhattan? We said the sun beginning to help us a little bit now. Bill Rogers, any comment from you out there?
Yes, the sun is coming out. This race is getting tougher and tougher. And though the Italian runner Pizzolato looks good, this man has a PR of 2:14 in the marathon. He has very little experience. I still think it's wide open.
Well, Bill, we're told that Dixon is now 1 minute and 15 behind. And he looks a little tired.
Of course he looks tired. I think everyone looks tired. They're wet. They're pouring water on their heads. But Dixon is, you can't count this guy out. Look what he did last year. He's a great tactician.
Okay, well, there you have a look at him as Bill Rogers reports from the course. Now, you have some comment for us on the women's division at this moment, Diana?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me throw in, Bill just brought up something important, a medical point about putting water on the head. Drinking water is not the only way to hydrate yourself, and as you know, in the cold, about 80% of the heat escapes through the head, and you've got to keep the head warm. The same thing here, if you want to keep cool, the smart ones are going to pour it over their head as much as they do take it in. The women's race, Grete is at 14 miles, 2.5 minutes ahead of the rest of the field, and it looks like we're going to have a wonderful Grete Waitz finish again. But Véronique Marot, who's a very impressive sort of newcomer to the marathon from Great Britain, born in France from Great Britain, is running a great race in second, and she's holding off Lara Fogley, who we mentioned at the beginning of the show, by only 4 seconds. So the second and third race is tight, and it's been that way since the first step.
And of course, Greta's still having physical problems, it appears, on the race course. So that story could tighten up. But there is the leader, Pizzolato, to the cheers of the crowd on First Avenue in New York. Now, Dixon has made a point of the way the crowd turns him on First Avenue right now. He's hearing those cheers. We saw him wave to the crowd at one point, just before we cut away the last time. So,
well, if Rod Dixon is confident at this point and has a chance to wave to the crowd, he's a better man than I, because I would be very worried. But Bill has been in the same position. He thinks, and he's closer to the leaders than we are, he thinks that there's still a chance. But, boy, I really think that this man has taken it and may have stolen one of the greatest races from a very deep field with a bold move in the middle of the race.
There is a look at the finish line that awaits somebody right there. Grandstands at that point, the only grandstands on the course, I believe. There's a look at where they started, the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge, a long way behind them now.
Dixon,
and there you see one of the earlier, handicapped runners. That is John Cruz from the Achilles Tack Club being passed by the leader at long last, Orlando Pizzolato. So it's the first time he's seen anybody else out there on the course except for other disabled runners.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jim. I was just remembering that Rod Dixon had said this week, as many of the marathoners have, that with the depth of field these days, if you're not going to have a 100% race, and on a hot day it's very difficult to have a 100% race, you're not going to win. And Rod Dixon is probably back there having an 85% race. So we'll see if he can pull it up to 90 and maybe even take it today.
Well, look at this. He just moved up into 5th place in the race. Maybe it's not over. Much more impressive. He's got a good, solid lead. Right now, by the way, we talked about the Battle of Long Island a couple times earlier, how the Americans fled across the water to the island of Manhattan. There's Pat Peterson in 2nd place right now in the race. Well, right about this point is where the British caught up with them again and chased them up into the Bronx, eventually to New Jersey. But it was a great strategic retreat. One of the wheelchair entries in the race. It's unbelievable how fast those guys move. Look at this. My goodness. For a couple of years, there was some question about the safety of having wheelchair athletes in, and they were not technically allowed, but now that seems to have been cleared away. And, of course, they have made their sport a much more competitive situation and a safer one as the years go by. A look at Peterson, however, in second place, and now Dave Murphy has moved into third place from England. And remember, Dixon is fifth.
Well, Peterson has run a great race, but you see him looking down now. He's having both physical and psychological problems. And if we could talk to Bill, Dave Murphy in third place there, I think that he may be the only man that has a chance of catching Orlando in the park. Murphy has been very hot. He won the Falmouth Road race in August. He has been pointing for this marathon for over a year. He's a runner who was not able to run as well as he could in college because he's an Englishman that attended Western Kentucky and had to work a job all through school. About 6 months ago, one of the shoe companies took a chance on him and said, take 6 months and just train and see what happens. And now we're seeing what happened. I think that Murphy, who is picking up the pace, has a chance.
Okay, well, an Englishman won at Boston this year, an Englishman won in Chicago. Let's see what happens in the streets of New York. Dave Murphy, as we said, as you said, graduated from Western Kentucky, so let's hear it from all our friends in Western Kentucky, as well as from Liverpool, England. Dave Murphy, obviously some Irish in his background also. Bill Rogers, comment from you.
Yeah, I think, you know, Murphy has won, he's been on a winning streak this year. He won the prestigious Falmouth Road race this August under hot weather conditions, beat a world-class field, including silver medalist Mike McLeod of England. He won the Midnight Runner magazine run here in New York City. He's lucky in New York, maybe. We have to watch for him. He hasn't done that much in the marathon, but this could be his day. It looks like it might be.
Well, they say there are horses for courses, and of course that's an old horse racing expression, but it often seems to be true in running too, particularly in long-distance running, like the way Grete Waitz loves New York City. She is still leading in the women's division, by the way, and leading by a lot. Whether the physical problems will catch up with her, we'll be checking on. She's leading by 2:36.
We cannot get split times on Dave Murphy, but it's obvious from the way he's burying Peterson and just from his stride that he is increasing the pace. We do know that Pizzolato is slowing down. He was running 4:53, then a 5:03, then a 5:05, so he's slowing down, not dramatically, but they are closing the gap.
On the women's side, Greta's at 15 miles, still 2.5 minutes ahead at about a 2:26 pace. And as we mentioned before, and you must know, she was the silver medalist in LA this summer. You might be wondering where Joan Benoit is. She obviously isn't out. She's training now for the National Cross Country Championships, which will be in Boston next month. She just got married a few weeks ago, and I guess she deserves a break.
I think she does, after winning the first women's marathon in Olympics history. Central Park, beautiful in this late October day. The standings, however, more important. Orlando Pizzolato of Italy, the leader. Peterson, Dave Murphy of England. Rod Dixon now in fourth place, but he's 1 minute and 26 seconds behind. He's got to get moving, but there are, remember, still many miles to go, including the last 6 miles. And as they say, the last 6 miles make the difference in any marathon. Well,
we always talk about the 20-mile point being the halfway point in the marathon, and perhaps that's true in New York. 3 miles, but the runners in the top are not believing that as much as they did anymore, because we see many track runners who haven't got a lot of experience with marathon coming up and going right through that old wall and continuing on to run great races. But this stretch on First Avenue has done a lot of great track runners in. Even Carlos Lopez, who just won the Olympic race, was running fine to the 20-mile mark one year and then just stopped.
There is Grete Waitz still out in front, still easily in front, going at a 2:25.05 pace, 2 minutes and 36 seconds ahead of the second-place woman.
Well, unfortunately, we have lost our communication with Larry Ross, and we don't know whether she's been having that problem that she had earlier in the shorts. But Grete, the one thing about her is that she picks it up as she goes along. She's experienced. We said she started out fairly fast today, but you can bet that if she feels this good, even with a physical problem today, when it gets to be around 20 miles, she's going to start clocking in some real fast miles. I would suspect down in the 5:25 and 5:20 area. And we might find one of her fastest runs in her history today, but I doubt down to her fastest time.
Notice that she did take water on this stop, passed up a couple of cups, and then finally decided to take one after 16 miles, 2:25 pace. She has a 2:40 lead now, we're told. Let's go to Donna De Verona on the course.
Thank you, Jim. Of course, this is 63rd Street, right around where the athletes come off the bridge, and many have said this is the time when they really feel high because of the crowd that lines the street. There's over 2.5 million spectators here. Many of them, again, have their individual stories. Behind me, the parents of a proud runner, Mr. Hickey. Is this the second time, and do you always stand here?
Came right here last year. We're right in this spot. We root like the devil for Kevin. He's a gutsy kid, and he's going to make it again this year. He rode 4 miles last year. 4 miles. He's going to go 3:59 this year. He's a gutsy boy. He's going to do it again.
And after here, you're going to make it over to the finish line?
Make it over. What's the finish line? If I have to run like heck myself.
So we're going to see. Do you run?
Well, I roll better than I run, but I'm going to get over there somehow. Believe me. No, it's a great day, and we're very happy for Kevin. He's going to do it.
Okay, you can see, Jim, a lot of spirit out here. Back to you.
Okay, I hope Mr. Hickey doesn't run too fast getting to that finish line. Doesn't look like he's in quite the shape that good boy Kevin is. A lot of good boys out there in the field today.
Pizzolato just completed a 5:12 mile. He is slowing down.
Incidentally, Dave Murphy was passed over for the British Olympic team. He's got a little something to prove here. He did a 2:11.18 in Sydney, Australia. So he, Dave Murphy could be the man if Pizzolato weakens. Look at the temperature now. It's gone up 10 degrees, 74 degrees. The humidity, 96%. Now, almost anything could still happen with that.
It was 88 at the start of the race, and it's one thing to have humidity and have it dropping off as the day goes on, but as the race goes on and you're naturally getting tired, dehydrated, if the weather is also going against you, then it can hit you very quickly. You kind of lose control of the situation, and it sneaks up on you, much as we saw with Gabriel Anderson. Heat stroke, contrary to Diana's opinion, heat stroke is the only thing that can kill a healthy runner, and if you get some dizziness and you continue to push, it can grab your mind before it grabs your legs.
Now, they're just about to come off the Willis Avenue Bridge, and they'll go into the Bronx, the South Bronx, for a very short period. More important, however, is that just after they come off this bridge, here, by the way, is Linda Down, the cerebral palsy victim. 2 years ago, she did it in over 11 hours, came in at 9 o'clock in the darkness. Last year, she took 3 hours off that time, did 8 hours and something. She's hoping to get under 8 hours this time. My point was, as they come off this bridge here, they will hit the 20-mile mark precisely. Then they've got those last 6 miles to go. There is Noel Johnson waving to you. That man is 85 years old. 85 years old. What was he? When he was 80, he took up boxing or something like that. Altogether, a remarkable physical specimen.
Well, he better start running, because there's an 83-year-old Max Bain from St. Petersburg, Florida, who is probably very good in the heat, who may be coming on him.
The over 80 division, slugging it out through the streets in 96-degree humidity, 74-degree temperature, most unseasonable weather for late October in New York. Pizzolato still the leader as he nears the 20-mile mark. Grete Waitz still in front for the women. Leading the women's division. Men, of course, first-time men running along with her. But Larry Rawson's still out there on the motorcycle. Let's try one more time. Can you hear me, Larry?
Jim, I can hear you. We have just crossed over 97th Street on the Upper East Side. Grete is in great shape. She's running beautifully. Her arm carriage continues to go well. She is still landing on the ball of her feet as she has just passed 18 miles in 1 hour, 41 minutes, and 7 seconds. I'll leave that translation to Diana. I would like to add that she is back on the pace of about 5 minutes and 40 seconds for the last couple of miles as we came up the east side.
Did she, however, have a physical problem?
Yes, she did. She did have a physical problem back in Brooklyn, but she's been fine ever since, and she's been running very comfortably. At no time did that change her gait. Her carriage has been beautiful. I think she's well within herself here. She is pumping her arms a little more vigorously than she did up through about the 10-mile mark. She has become, I'd say she's really concentrating more on the road now. Her look, which is always stoic, has become even more so, and I'm a little concerned here where it has now become sunny at about the 16-mile mark. It got sunny for a short time, Jim, at about the 5-mile mark, and about a mile later the cloud cover returned.
Now, Larry, excuse me, she again was making that little motion of adjusting her running shorts or perhaps having a problem. You know, we had conjecture that, frankly, she might have a diarrhea problem. You think she still has it?
Jim, that's the case, and I don't think she is having it, or has had it for quite a while. I have not seen her tug at her shorts for probably 8 miles. And just as we return to Grete with our camera, she started tugging at her shorts again, but she has not let that dismay her in any way. I mean, she continues on. Her pace has been very even, and she looks tremendous here. I'll tell you, there's 4.5 miles of bridges in this course, and where there's not bridges, there's human beings cheering. This has been a sensational experience for her.
We spoke earlier in the show whether Grete was thinking of her Olympic experience and making up some time on Joan Benoit, and I think she knew at the top of the day it was too hot to go after that 2:22:43 world record of Joan's. But I bet you anything that Grete Waitz has in her mind at the moment Allison Rowe's New York record, which is 2:25:29, and Grete, if she can pick it down into the 5:20s, she just might be able to ellipse that. Her fastest mile, 5:31. To get Allison's record of 2:25:29, she's going to have to pick up the last 6 miles down into 5:20s, 5:25 and under.
Yeah, but look, she only did 6:37 on the last mile and is now at a pace of 2:27 and something.
That's got to be a mistake.
Unlikely.
That's got to be a 5:37.
All right, now let's go to the men's story because it is about to build. There's going to be a race, it looks like. Here is Orlando Pizzolato of Italy. He is still the leader in the race. However, he did the last mile in 5:26. He is slowing. Rod Dixon is less than a minute behind now, has moved into 3rd place ahead of Pat Peterson, is just behind Dave Murphy, and both Murphy and Dixon certainly have a solid chance, I would think, Marty, of catching this man.
Well, I think we've entered the last chapter on Orlando. As Bill pointed out, I might have been too excited at 18 miles, not because he's Italian, but maybe because I am. He ran a 5:12 and a 5:26, and I think in about another 2.5 miles it's going to be Ciao Orlando, and Rod Dixon and Dave Murphy will be fighting for the top spot.
For those of you not familiar with the Italian expression ciao, it's see you around, or arrivederci.
Well, I would have said arrivederci, but when you say ciao, that means you have feelings for people, and he ran a great race, and I feel he's worthy of a lot of praise, but I don't think he's going to win now.
At age 26, he did under 2:15 last year in this race, but he's still something of a neophyte in marathon running. Of course, first-time marathon have run and won very important races, including last week in Chicago when Steve Jones set a world best time. No official world records kept in marathon because the courses all vary to some degree, but the world's best time was set in Chicago a week ago today. Pizzolato getting splashed with water. Doesn't look too bad, does he?
I was going to say that even though his last mile was very slow, his legs still look fairly springy.
Well, his turnover, the cadence, though, has slowed down. There's 2 ways you can slow down. Your stride can get shorter, or the rate you turn him over gets slower. And he's still springy. He's still getting the same length out of his stride, but the RPMs aren't there anymore. And when we get a shot of Dave Murphy, as we've had, he is still motoring. He's still picking up the pace. I don't think that Orlando is going to be able to recover in the park and get back down the 5-minute pace, which is what he's going to have to do. There's Peterson, and he is now in 4th place. Has run a very valiant race. He's going to be the top American, I would think, if he can hold on in the park. But you see his form is starting to go awry, and that's trouble when you go up the hills. And when you go down the hills, going down the hills is actually harder on your legs.
I noticed that's the first time I've seen Pizzolato look down.
That's a sign of tiring. You know horses. When the horse's tail drops, it's almost over. And when the runners start looking down at their feet and digging in, trying to take a few hard steps to increase that stride rate, you know it's starting to come hard to them. He's also gobbling all the water he can get also.
Pizzolato now in the streets of West Harlem. He stopped. The leader has stopped. Pizzolato shaking his head, obviously feeling pain in his chest there, it looked like, in the middle.
Pain, dizziness. If he's getting the dizziness, he needs to stop and gather himself, stop and get some water. He can hold on for 4th or 5th. There's a lot for him to still accomplish, but if he pushes it too hard and goes for the win, he may be in the same predicament that Gabriel Anderson was in the Olympics.
Now the race,
battling those gremlins right now.
Very soon the race that may go to Dave Murphy of England and Rod Dixon of New Zealand, the defending champion. Now, let's see if we can see Murphy. There he is, just very small on the top of your screen, behind the red shirt there. He's very, very small behind the motorcycle in the middle of your screen. Now he's obscured a little bit. But Murphy is in the picture at this point as Pizzolato has stopped once and is running much, much slower. The last mile was at 5:19, but he's not running that fast right now. That was at the end of 21 miles. Less than 5 miles to go in the race now. Let's take a break because things are going to be developing very quickly. Murphy second, Peterson back ahead of Dixon. Far on First Avenue, you knew you were coming, didn't you? Okay. They'll hoist one and then go back out and watch a few thousand more runners come by. Well, of no interest to this man, he is in deep trouble. Orlando Pizzolato of Italy, while we're away, he stopped again briefly, started up again. He's going to try to slog it out. He's still the leader in the race. Murphy is second, but now Peterson has moved back ahead of Rod Dixon, and that is a very significant thing. Peterson did not look like he was about to start running faster, so it must be that Dixon is running slower, just at the point where we would expect him to start moving up.
Even in this shot, it seemed as if in the last long shot we had that Murphy was closer. Could he also be getting problems and slowing down? Pizzolato seems to be maintaining his pace. Yeah, you can see that his stride and his arms are not as fluid as they were, 5 miles ago when he was really motoring and pulling away from Rod Dixon. He has certainly slowed down his cadence also.
So as Pizzolato stopped twice, we thought, well, that's it for him. However, these men are hurting just as much or almost as much as he is, possibly. Now, there's the leader going around the corner. Let's see what the relationship is. They gave us 52 seconds the last time. Looks like that's just about what it is. They've just passed the 22-mile mark. There's less than 4 miles to go for the leader, but those last miles in Central Park are going to be an agony.
I remember running in this same point where Pizzolato is, I think, is that Marcus Garvey Park? There's a little
going around Marcus Garvey Park.
Right, I felt pretty good there. And then I got into Central Park and the hills, and each one of them it was like, is this the last one? And it really got harder from this spot right there.
No one can know what it feels like inside that man's body right now except Kim. It must be unbelievable. Let's take a look at the course again. They've gone all that course. When we talk about the long blue line, there is literally, a blue dotted line that goes all the way along this course. You follow the line until you come to the end of it at the finish line in Central Park. But that's where they are now in West Harlem. Pizzolato almost to a jog now, but Murphy still not gaining in any significant way.
Oh, 5:38 for Pizzolato. He is hurting. Dave Murphy is hurting, and Rod Dixon dropped out.
Rod Dixon, that's the word that we get. Rod Dixon has stopped, the defending champion and the favorite. So somebody we haven't seen yet could still win this race if Pizzolato should stop and Murphy would stop. And Pizzolato right now is slowing down. We can see very much again that Rod Dixon is out of the race. The defending champion has stopped. The heat and the humidity are tremendous on the sidewalks of New York on this late day in October. And here is Dave Murphy. He's hurting. He probably doesn't know how much Pizzolato is hurting yet. It doesn't really have him in his sights.
Well, he's had him in his sights a couple of times. What you do is if you have a watch, or if you don't, you count. He'll watch Pizzolato turn a corner, disappear from sight. Then he'll look on his watch and see how long it takes him to get to the same spot. He'll do that again, and he'll know, am I gaining on him? I was 7 seconds at the last turn. Here it is again.
It looks to me like every finish we see today on both sides, men's and women's, front of the pack and back of the pack, are going to be difficult and gutsy.
Okay,
this is a race day.
You, Marty, have your theory that there comes a time when you should stop a runner. Suppose this man is still leading the race with a quarter of a mile to go, but he looks like he's in terrible, terrible shape.
Well, I assume you're referring to Gabriel Anderson in the Olympics. She was in 37th place and was in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but I mean, suppose he is leading
with a quarter of a mile. If he stumbles and he's winning the race, I say let him continue.
Okay, 22 miles, 5:38 was the last mile for Pizzolato. Here he is still.
There's Grete there. Did not look in anywhere near as big as trouble as the two head men, but she has fallen off her pace also. The heat must be getting to her. She's down to a 2:27 pace at this point, almost a minute off what she was running just a mile ago.
Incidentally, Dixon stopped because of cramps. He had cramps last year and was able to run through them. This time, he has not been able to. Rod Dixon out of the race. Murphy, second place. just hanging on, but ahead of him, Pizzolato, we would have thought might have stopped and finished by this point. In a sense, he almost seems to be going a little better. Can you run through that sort of agony and come back?
I think so. You definitely can run through the heat getting you. The heat gets to you, your temperature goes up. It's one of the reasons you slow down in any race. Your core temperature gets up too high. I think when it gets up to around 102, you have to slow down. But if you slow down, throw water on yourself, get that thermostat back in line, you can get going again. I just wonder if he speaks English. It may be that he doesn't speak English, and what people are yelling to him, he has no idea how far ahead he is.
The heat draining these men and the women tremendously. Now going at a 2:12 pace, this almost certainly will be one of the slowest of the modern day, let's say, New York City marathons. But there's a very good reason. It's hot.
Hopping again.
Orlando Pizzolato, hurting, holding the center of his chest time after time. He has stopped 3 times, I believe 4 times perhaps already in the race, but he is still leading the New York City Marathon. There he stops again at the water stop. The water on the head. There are less than 3 miles to go now. He's in Central Park. He can hear the crowd urging him on. He leads Dave Murphy by about 50 seconds. Murphy hurting, it appears, almost as much as he does. But suppose Pizzolato has to stop. Murphy would then become the leader automatically. And behind him still Pat Peterson. So many things could happen with less than 3 miles to go. But as you, Marty Lepori, pointed out earlier, there are hills here in Central Park. And the real agony has begun.
Well, I'd like to pass this hot potato to Bill Rogers. I've already called this race wrong twice already. He's just run 5:05, 5:12, 26, 20, 38, and 5:41. What do you think now, Bill?
Yes.
Go ahead. Can you hear us, Bill?
I think Murphy's going to win.
You think Murphy is going to win? Why?
Orlando stopped 4 times. He has stomach trouble.
Yeah.
He has stomach trouble, I think.
I know, but he keeps hanging on, and each time that he stops, he seems to get refreshed somehow and keep going. Now, Murphy looks pretty good to you, though?
Excuse me?
Does Murphy look pretty good to you? Physically?
Physically?
Yeah, Murphy.
Murphy, I think, looks better under control. You know,
Okay.
the little bit I can see, he's moved up in the last mile quite a bit. He's maybe 80 yards back is all. The sun is out, and I just think that Orlando, I don't think he can quite make it. It reminds me of last year.
Okay.
Although we always learn in all these endurance sports that regardless of how bad you're hurting physically, when you're coming toward the end, there's an emotional uplifting. And when you say, Marty, now that he's entered the park, and he hears the roaring, oh boy, here we go.
It's not going to be enough. It is not going to be enough today.
So I'm taking the look back to see his nemesis just coming around the curve.
I don't know.
Dave Murphy.
He's a gutsy inspiration. He holds his stomach as if he's in nausea. He looks back, and then he presses on as hard as he was running.
Really quite remarkable. He'll come out of the park, remember, go along Central Park South, where many of the great hotels are in New York, then back into the park for that last quarter mile, if he can make it that far. But every time he stops, you think it's the last time, but it's not.
Well, this is what is meant by the loneliness of the long-distance runner. It's not how many people are running next to you. It's the loneliness when you're at this point and you can look from side to side and no one can help you. It's him. He's all alone now, as is Murphy. The crowds won't make too much of a difference here. This is not an emotional thing. This is just slugging it out. Murphy, as Bill has said, is trying to keep it under control, not stopping, not trying to shake it out, just trying to keep an even pace.
Okay, we're trying to show you the relationship now. There is the leader, Pizzolato. There you see him through the trees of Central Park. And as you say, Marty, the loneliness comes from inside, not outside now. And where is Murphy? Where is Murphy? I think he's closer than that. I think he's close.
Pizzolato.
Closer than where we are now.
Still thinking very clearly, though. I mean, the last 7, 8 minutes.
No, there he is.
He pours water on his head continuously. He's still trying to grab down and finish this thing.
Oh, his mind is spinning. He is trying to figure out how he can pull this off. Can I shorten my stride up?
Excuse me, I just want to say, Marty, that there's the tiny person way in the back. That was Murphy. But it's only a matter of several hundred yards. There is the overhead look at Dave Murphy. But each time Pizzolato stops, he looks back, he sees his man, he knows that all he's got to do is stay ahead of that one person.
Well, I think Bill's right that Murphy does look better. He will catch. We have over 2.5 miles to go. He will catch Pizzolato. Pizzolato may try and go with him as long as he can.
Is he getting to the point now where it's difficult? to think, difficult to...
No, I think his mind is very clear. He knows what his problem is, and he's trying to work through it. Either get rid of the cramp, or if your thighs are gone, you try and push off with your toes more and use your calves more. Go to a different muscle system. Take a few quick steps. See if you can snap out of it. But the writing, as Bill said, the handwriting's on the wall. Murphy's been able to just keep that same stride. He's plodding after him. And right now it's like the tortoise and the hare. Here's the hare. He's running, stopping, and Murphy is just taking the slow course.
Do you think that Murphy is still then conserving a little something for the finish?
Right. And Murphy is now 15 seconds behind. Yep. It seems like it is Murphy's race. The drama will be how Pizzolato reacts, how much of his soul he's going to lay down and try and go with Murphy, because I don't think he can win, but he can certainly answer a question that he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. You know, do I just let him go by, or do I run until I drop?
Did you say how much of his soul he has to lay down?
That's what it is
now. That's what
now.
it gets to, right?
Yeah, that's what it is now.
And of course, Murphy is going through that same process we talked about before. He was physically hurting quite a bit just a couple of miles ago. Now he has the closest distance, about 15 seconds, from Pizzolato he's had so far, and that, even though he's hurting, is uplifting, and it carries him every few strides to getting closer to him.
The park must seem endless at this point. He'd like to see Central Park South and know that he's a little bit closer to the finish line. Somebody gave him some water. I think that's water. Yep.
It's like...
Well, I mean, it could be Chianti, you know.
It's deja vu. It's just like last year, that great finish with Jeff Smith and Rod Dixon. And in just a few minutes, you know, you'll see, as that picture last year, of the tremendous emotional difference between first and second.
Grete Waitz, by the way, now is a 3.5-minute lead in the women's race. That's why we're not going to that more often with the high drama here with the men. After 24 miles, 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 40 seconds for this man, Pizzolato. Murphy's still second, and Pat Peterson is still third. The lead, as we said, 16 seconds. That's only 90 yards. It's less than the length of a football field now. 9 first downs away is Dave Murphy of England and Western Kentucky University. Pizzolato here, age 26, ran in New York last year, ran a better time in Rome, but still not a really experienced marathon runner.
Well, Pizzolato's gone almost a minute now without stopping. He just may pull this out. I've got a buzz of inspiration going all through me.
It's got to be frustrating for Dave Murphy. He's only 15 seconds behind, but physically, he just can't take those few steps and get up there. He can't grab him. He's now constantly watching Pizzolato's back, but it's just coming so slowly. It's like hanging on the edge of a building. You know, sooner or later you're going to drop or you're going to get back on the ledge, but it's coming so slowly now.
In 1908, in the Olympic marathon, it was another Italian, Dorando Pietri, a small man who led the marathon, coming into the stadium in London. But as he entered the stadium, he didn't know where he was. Officials turned him in the wrong direction first. Finally, he got started in the right direction, and officials helped him across the finish line. Then, as now, that was illegal, and Pietri lost the race. Well, here is the Norwegian woman, second home to her, the streets of New York, but for the first time, you can see a little hurt in Grete Waitz's face, but she's got a 3.5-minute lead.
3.5-minute lead, and she's past the 20-mile mark now, taking water consistently, but she doesn't seem to be worried about the race. She just wants to finish in good health, I'm sure.
You see the policemen trying to get those people back. Orlando has to be careful to cut the tangents. There are curves in the park, and what he needs to do is go from the apex of one turn. You'll see him, he's doing it, crossing the road to the apex of another. This is what cost Jeff Smith the race last year. He didn't cut the tangents, and in the park you can lose some 40 to 50 yards just by not cutting the tangents. Jeff Smith was so mentally out on his feet that he just stared at that blue line and followed it like a car in traffic. He stayed in his lane, but Orlando is cutting the tangents, and if the crowds will get back so he can gain every inch,
he might make it. It's the same thing as in automobile racing. Just cut from one corner to the other. In other words, try to go as close to a straight line as you can all the time.
One of the Italian runners, one of the men, had told me this week that they're very proud of the depth of their teams, men and women, but that they didn't have anyone of good enough quality to win this race.
Miles ago, we thought this man had it way up in West Harlem. Remember that? When he stopped for the first time. He has stopped, I haven't kept count, what, 5, 6 times, I think, up to this point. But he hasn't stopped in maybe 2 minutes. And he is not that far. Still far enough, but not that far from the end of the race.
This is a different type of race. It's a race of attrition. When he took the lead at 10 miles, they were running 4:55. Then he ran a 5:05 in 5 minutes. But from about the 14th mile, every mile has gotten slower, but nobody is catching him. That's not the way it usually happens. We saw in the Olympics, it was the opposite. The last 3 miles, they were flying. They were coming on the field. This is just a race of attrition. It's a stamina event now. It's not a speed event. The miler, Rod Dixon, the fastest miler in the field, a 3:53 miler, did not have the strength and the stamina on this very hot day.
Well, it was the late, great Satchel Paige who said, never look back. Something may be gaining on you. Well, Pizzolato can't help it. He keeps looking back, and somebody is not gaining on him, but is staying there relentlessly. And he has to wonder, is Murphy just poised for the kill, just waiting until they get on Central Park South, or maybe even back into the park again, or just waiting for Pizzolato to stop to conserve his own energy? Or is Murphy hurting enough that he may just be able to maintain where he is? We don't know.
Pizzolato, we should put this into perspective. He was a 2:14 marathoner. He's run 2 or 3 of them. On the track, I wouldn't even call him world class. He's on the verge of being a world class 5 and 10,000 meter runner, and he has come in here and pulled one of the, well, in an Olympic year, it's hard to just off the top of your head say this is the greatest upset you've seen for the year. But this would be a tremendous upset.
No question of it. As you saw the little pause, and then starting again with the quick look back to see where is Murphy. Where is that man? Whether he even knows it's Murphy, we don't know. But he knows there's somebody there in a striped singlet that is just driving him bananas.
Marty, it's confusing me, these quick comebacks. He stops, he seems to be in agony almost. He bends over, he grabs his solar plexus, but then he's within a half a second, he's back up to a fairly good pace.
Well, he could have air cramps. He's not that experienced at the marathon. When you drink and you're not used to it and you gulp a lot of water with the drink, you'll get air into your system and you'll get some cramps. If you bend over, massage that air bubble through the intestine or whatever, you can start running again with no problem. So that is probably it. But look at that shot. Murphy is just hanging there.
Right.
He can't make it up.
Did you notice that Pizzolato first turned down 2 cups of water, then he took 1, but then he looked into the cup and then threw it away?
Let's go to Bill, because we hear that Pizzolato is not 15 seconds ahead. He is now 24 seconds ahead of Dave Murphy.
Okay, Bill Rogers, if you hear us, is that the fact? Is this man increasing his lead now? Bill Rogers, can you hear me? Maybe Bill had it.
I think Bill fainted from the excitement.
At any rate, the word is, excuse me, Diana, that Pizzolato has lengthened his lead from 15 seconds to 23. This is an entirely different story than we've ever seen in the New York City Marathon before. After 25 miles, there is just about a mile to go. Hello? Just about a mile to go. The lead at 24 seconds. Bill, do you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Is he actually lengthening his lead?
I'm surprised he's hanging on. He's stopped 4 or 5 times. I guess he has cramps from dehydration.
Yes, but is he lengthening his lead now? Is he further ahead?
Yeah, I can't see Murphy. The turns are coming too quickly. Murphy is not in sight. It looked like he was moving well for a while.
Unbelievable. Pizzolato then apparently is lengthening his lead at the turn onto Central Park South.
About a mile to go now.
That's right. Just about a mile. The Plaza Hotel on his left as he goes along here. He'll pass other great hotels, but the crowd that he will hear for the most part will be on his right. You see them there.
The 24th mile was 5:50, so he is slowing down to what many of the back-of-the-pack people would have considered to be a good pace for them.
There is Murphy. Murphy now turning onto Central Park South. And Rod Dixon at this point last year was maybe not this far back, but the man in front of him was running maybe even a little better than Pizzolato. At least Jeff Smith did not stop at all last year. This man has now stopped 7 or 8 times.
I wanted to bring up, Marty, when you're speaking of attrition before and Dixon having to drop out, Gomez from Mexico, so used to the heat and such an experienced marathoner, isn't in there anymore either. I mean, maybe not in the race, but he's not up front.
Now Pizzolato has to be a little bit encouraged because he's able to move the legs and the arms still. He looks back and he doesn't see Murphy.
Well, it's as we said earlier, the hotter it is, the worse the condition. the more chance there is for an upset. And it looks like Pizzolato in this heat is going to run close to his best, 2:14. But the people like Murphy, who have the faster times, weren't able to duplicate them in the heat.
Up front, Pizzolato, and you just saw Murphy. He in the striped singlet. Here in the blue of Italy is Pizzolato. Too bad more of the people on the side don't know he's from Italy, because there's a tremendous Italian population, people of Italian descent in New York City. But they're all cheering him on, of whatever ethnic background. And the loneliness continues inside.
Although it's like a 10-minute standing ovation. It's got to help. If that crowd weren't there, I'd have to say he'd be out by now.
Well, we sure thought he was going to be out 5 or 6 times in the race, but not now. Now you have to say Pizzolato is the favorite to win, I would think.
Oh, he's got a good lead now with just, 3/4 of a mile to go. But even now, I can see that his stride is changing. He's searching. He's trying to use different muscles, trying to move the legs just a little differently. He was on his heels the entire race, so he hasn't been rocked back on his heels yet, but you can see he's trying to move those thighs a little differently.
But now into Columbus Circle. Statue of Columbus off to your right there in the middle of that circle. Another right turn, and he'll be in Central Park. He'll be in the home stretch with only about 1/4 of a mile to go to the finish line. Orlando Pizzolato slugging it out of the streets of New York now and back into the friendly confines of the park. The crowd in here, the biggest crowd anywhere. There's a grandstand as he comes to the finish line. I don't see how Murphy can catch him now unless this man would stop and simply be unable to continue any further.
He has pulled it off. He has mentally been able to fight, letting his form go to pieces. He's had so many problems. We don't know what they are. As Bill said, dehydration, cramps from drinking the water. But Murphy has done a wonderful job, too. He didn't panic. Murphy has continued to try and keep his pace even, hoping that it would bring him to the finish line ahead. He didn't try and sprint and panic. And Murphy is going to hold on for second, but I think there's your winner.
It sure looks like it. Finish line, not quite yet there yet. The long blue line almost coming to an end for him. Not yet. Not yet. Murphy is in the park. 2 men in the park headed for the finish. Another look back. He must feel that he's got it now. But still the grimace, the strain in the face. It will be interesting to see what happens after the finish line. Is he near collapse or not? Tremendous roar now from the crowd.
Tremendous roar, and I'm sure 99% of them have no idea who they're looking at. They've seen Rod Dixon's picture in the paper all week, and they don't see a mustache on this young man.
And Rod Dixon might well be wondering, if he were still in the race, who is this man? It's what we talked about before the race, that the man to fear very often in a marathon is the man you do not know. Well, here he is, the stranger. No longer a stranger to New York, Orlando Pizzolato. And there is the finish line. Here he comes. The winner of the 1984 New York City Marathon is Orlando Pizzolato. And he's still on his feet. Very much as Rod Dixon did last year, actually appearing to kiss the ground. Shake of the head. He's escorted over. We'll be talking to him if he speaks English. 2:14.52 unofficially. That's so much slower than any New York City Marathon we've seen. Murphy waving to the crowd. A valiant performance by the young man from Liverpool, England, and Western Kentucky University, as he'll come in to finish second in the race. Again, if you joined us late, Rod Dixon, the favorite, dropped out. Dropped out with cramps. Cramps didn't stop him last year. They did this time. Here's Murphy. Second place. Dave Murphy, age 27, just 5 feet 7 inches tall. Many distance runners tend to be of about average height. He was second in the Sydney Marathon. He won the Falmouth Road race. Was fifth in 1982 in the New York City Marathon. So he is very definitely world class, but now world class, and for the first time recognized as such, is the winner, Orlando Pizzolato. There's the official time, 2:14.52. You won't find that in the list of fastest marathons ever run. Now, number 45 on him. I wonder if that's a legitimate runner.
been happy if he
Yeah, he
were
looks a little
legitimate.
fresh to me. 45, I don't find it.
He has a low number.
Herbert Sheffman, we're told. Sheffney. Here is Pat Peterson finishing third. Pat Peterson from the New York area. From Manhattan College, finishing third in the New York City Marathon.
Pat looking very wobbly. He had just on the last leg came across the line. Great race for him, Marty.
Oh, he's got to be very happy with that, and he was so courageous in the first 10 miles. He deserves a great...
So it'll be interesting. As I said, we don't know whether this man speaks English or not. Donna Davarona is down there. We may have to use an interpreter. And now the other runners beginning to come in.
Boy, you'll see that this was a close race. Had any of those leaders faltered at all, they could have been picked off. It was a close race.
Herbert Stepney, they tell us, did finish third ahead of Pat Peterson. That was the fellow we saw. Wasn't a man we had known. Wasn't anybody we had seen during the race, so I don't know. But that's what we're told unofficially, that Herbert Stepney of West Germany was third. Pat Peterson fourth. Now that's good. Donna Davarona is at the finish line. Can you talk to him, Donna, yet? Donna Davarona, do you hit me?
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You stopped 4, 5, 6 times. You looked back. Tell us what the problem was. Was it cramping?
Yes, just a little crampy, but a very problem in the stomach. I don't know why. Maybe the very hot, terrible. Because in half marathon I ran well, but after half marathon there was the sun and the forecast. It was very terrible. But I am very happy.
I think you're very happy. You're from a club in Ferrara, Italy, near the center of Bologna, and you have a marathon club. How helpful was it to have 106 team members with you coming to New York to support your effort in the marathon?
Only my coach, because the other athletes now are stopped for the new season in the marathon.
And what was the toughest part of the course for you? I know you hung back and then you took the lead. Were you surprised that you kept it? You kept looking back. Who were you looking for?
I don't understand. It was in the Central Park because there are many hills and now it's very hot.
And your time?
But I don't know the time because the important is to win the competition.
Well, you were about 2 hours and 14 minutes. That's your previous best was 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Is 2:14 and 42 in the 82. Last year in New York I ran in 2:15 and 28, and I was 28.
Okay. Well, congratulations to you. Now back to you, Jim.
All right, Donna, do you still hear me? Apparently not. Okay. I was just wondering if he really believed that he was going to make it. Pizzolato has done a great display of courage in the streets of New York. The women's race still to be determined. We'll be back. Pizzolato of Italy, winner of the 1984 men's division of the New York City Marathon. Second place to Dave Murphy of England. Third to Herbert Stepney of West Germany. And fourth place to Pat Peterson of the United States. Fifth place, by the way, as we look at the winner there. Fifth place went to another Italian, Gianni Di Madonna, running into very first marathon. So a big day for Italy, 2 out of the top 5. There's Dave Murphy, who finished second in the race. And now we're going to go back on the course to Grete Waitz, nearing the finish line to win her 6th New York City Marathon. But a big day for Italy. As we said, they had a big pasta loading party last night. Maybe that helped, Marty.
Well, thousands of runners attended that one. But the Italians have to be happy. They were complaining about a hot summer in Italy this year, but it certainly paid off when they came to a hot New York Marathon in the fall.
Little courage here, however, too. Grete Waitz looking as relentless as ever, but about the first half of the race, she was obviously suffering from diarrhea, and as you all know, I'm sure, one time or other in your life, that drains your energy about as quickly as anything I can imagine. But she has she is going to do it again.
And Grete has said, as many of the top runners, that the time means nothing, especially on a very difficult day temperature-wise, and she's had more problems in temperature today. She's dropped back to near 2:29 pace today, but the point is she's 3.5, almost 4 minutes ahead of the next place, which is Veronique Moreau from England, who's, by the way, very close with Fogli from Italy still. And, you know, so much is said about Grete's athletic accomplishments. We always hear her times for the world cross country, etc. But I find some of her personal traits just as impressive. She said the other day at the press conference that one of the things she admires about herself most and that she's gotten out of running is that she speaks fluent English because of the New York Marathon. Every year she's more charming, humorous with the press. Another thing, she took her Olympic medal, as she did her Helsinki medal from the World Championships last year, her first place medal, put them in a kitchen drawer. Her husband, Jack, doesn't even know which drawer. I mean, I find her very unassuming and, as I said before, kind of the Chris Everett Lloyd of marathon running.
Puts the medals right in there with the potato masher and the can opener.
Just stashes them right in there. She knows many people in New York now. She goes and watches some of the races here that she's not in and watches people who, you know, run 10-minute miles, and she yells at them because they're the same people who have helped her when she comes here.
I understand, too, some of the people she's gotten to know in New York are called Saks Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, names like that. She loves to shop when she comes here and makes a big shopping expedition every year that she and her husband come to the New York City Marathon.
She is a shopper. She wears a necklace around her neck that's an exact replica of that huge statue that's in the middle of Norway, and she gave one of the race officials a replica of that because they've treated her so well here. And I don't know anyone who could say one bad word about Grete Waitz.
On Central Park South now. And again, as we mentioned earlier, you notice the crowd has not diminished because the men's winner went by, nor will it because the women's winner has run by. They'll be out there for hours and hours cheering on the back markers, the people who don't know what prize money is, who are out there only for their own personal motivation. And there are some of them.
Another comparative point with the men today, and Marty might be able to help me with this, with all the great runners you had in there, from Dixon on down, to be so far off what would be a normal marathon pace because of the weather, don't you find Grete's performance, if she comes in, let's say, around 2:29, anything under 2:30, is for this day a fantastic time?
We'll have to see the final time. It's been a great race because she had very tough circumstances. Grete is not the greatest runner in the heat. She's held up in the heat. She had problems early on, but didn't let it get to her concentration. She is very tough. She's had New York marathons where she's had problems before, but she worked through them and she has won them. And as you mentioned, she's given so much to the New York Marathon. At the very beginning of the show, we charted the growth in its popularity. I guess you'd have to be convinced that if she hadn't won the previous 5 and come back to New York and made personal appearances and made people such fans of her, there wouldn't be 2.5 million people out there lining the course.
We're told that Gabriela Anderson-Schiess has reached the 23.5-mile mark, by the way, so looks like she's going to make it. Remember Catherine Switzer said out in Los Angeles, most people, when they've had an experience like Anderson-Schiess had in the Olympics, do not ever come back to run well again, but she's running pretty well today.
Exactly, and Gabriela said she recovered pretty well. We said a minute ago that very few people here would know Pizzolato's face as he ran by, but they all know Grete's.
Oh, yeah.
They all know Grete's.
And 7 years ago, none of them would have known Grete.
Well, listen, when Grete was still a 1,500 meter back in, in the mid-70s, her coach said to her, let's bump up to the 3,000. I think you have some distance. She said, oh, no, I ran that race once. That's too much pain for me. And now here she is as a regular world-class, the marathoner.
You talk about the New Yorkers, again, as I always do, this year I had breakfast up at the New Wave Coffee Shop on Madison Avenue 74th. The guys, just as every year now, they're saying, I think 2:10 might do it this year. And as I say, 10 years ago, they had no idea what a marathon was, generally, let alone talk time.
Are you
New Yorkers do
just like Rod Dixon? You have to eat at the same place before the show?
Eat at the same place every year.
Well, I usually don't announce my bets, but I made a friendly bet with Bill Rogers this year, and he was nothing personal because you know how much I admire Grete. He gave me the rest of the field against Grete, and looks like you've got me, Bill.
Yeah, so he gave you a few thousand runners. However, against this one, it wasn't too good a bet.
And now at 25 miles, she was 4 minutes and 14 seconds over Veronique Moreau ahead of her. And it just, again, proves her superiority against most of the world of women's marathoners.
Look at this, still a smile and talking to the man running alongside of her.
She loves it. She loves New York. She says it's her favorite place to run. She can't be, the whole week here, she spends out in the streets, in the park. She doesn't duck back into a hotel room so that she won't be in the public eye. She loves the New York Marathon.
And with good reason. You know, you can't bottle things like these cheers, but you sure can remember them. And when you can go back and hear them year after year after year, well, it keeps you coming back at least one more year. The sixth time he's had this opportunity to wave to them in the last couple hundred yards.
You know, Grete has said often, even 2 years before the Olympic Games, that, oh, maybe this will be my last marathon. But she shows up year after year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see her in '88 in Seoul, South Korea.
Okay, here she comes. There you see the time, 2:29:30. Exactly, 2:29:30, the time for Grete Waitz. And a ready smile.
Fabulous time for this heat. That's a 5:42 average. And when Marty mentioned that some of the men had to drop down to 5:50 miles, very, very slow for them because of the heat. For Grete to average 5:42 a mile on a day like this is extremely impressive. 2:29:29 as the final time and her 6th win here in New York.
Okay, they shaved one more second off it for her.
I think what you're going to see, there's her husband, Jack, with her. One of the measures of success for the hobbyist, the guy who does this every day but is not spending his life at it, is to gear how you do against Grete Waitz. And I think this year she probably finished up higher in the men's field than she ever did before because of that heat.
Well, in the first New York City Marathon, the winning men's time was 2:31 and something. And that was just 4 loops around Central Park, a little easier than the hills and the bridges that they do nowadays. And there is the men's winner, still drinking it in, Orlando Pizzolato of Italy. Grete Waitz has now finished the course. We'll try to have a word with her very shortly here. Oh, those shoes may have had it. Be seeing this week with David Brinkley, the subject, the CIA, the guests, Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York, who may have been watching this race with some interest in the streets of New York, and 2 former CIA directors, Admiral Stansfield Turner and William Colby. That's coming up next, right after our live coverage of the marathon concludes at 1:30 Eastern Time. Donna DeVerona down at the finish line with Grete Waitz. All right, Donna.
And a happy Grete Waitz, 6-time winner of the New York Marathon. Grete, if you compare these to the last 5, what's the comparison? It was hot out there and you had trouble. Explain.
This was my worst marathon, no doubt about that. I don't know, I think I knew it would be very warm, so I have been drinking more than usual, and then I felt, when I came on the bridge, I felt that I should have been somewhere else, but no return there, and so I just had to run, and I got some stomach problems already after 3-4 miles, and it lasted until we reached Queensboro Bridge. So.
And you have ice on your leg now?
Yes, I think because of the stomach problem, I was afraid of drinking too much, so I think, oh sorry, I sweat in my eye. I got dehydrated, I think, so, and then when you get dehydrated, it's very easy to get cramp in your muscles.
You're 31 years old, you've won just about everything possible. The games in '88 are a long time away. What are your plans? Do you think you can stretch that far, and can somebody get us something to mop off our eyes here? Somebody have a towel?
Well, as you said, I've been running around now for so many years, and it's very hard to tell about the future. I just have to take one year at a time, because after so many years with international running, it has been very hard on my body, and I have been troubled with injuries the last 4 years since I started to prepare for the marathon, and also sometimes it's difficult for me to get motivated to do the hard work.
Grete, we are so close when we cover you, and we noticed at the beginning of the race that you did pull down on your shorts, and you do have a stomach problem. Was that the reason?
Pardon?
Well, at the beginning of the race, Larry Rawson and the cameras came in very close. We noticed you had a little bit of trouble with your shorts.
Yes, and that problem I had through most most of the race. I think it was over when I came across Queensboro Beach.
So your stomach felt much better at the end?
Yes, I didn't really have any stomach pain, but it takes away my concentration. So for the first part of the race, my concentration was not into my running, it was to my stomach. And you're running a marathon, you have to be 100% concentrated on what you're doing.
When you crossed the finish line, as you were coming by, you said something to one of the runners. What was it?
The little guy that was running together with me, I don't know if he knew that he should finish on a separate, because he was almost running in my shoes.
So you told him the right direction?
Yes, I just told him that, we have separate finish lines.
Well, it's been obvious that there is prize money when you cross the finish line, $25,000 for the winner, a Mercedes, and open competition. When you cross the finish line, was that a consideration?
No, not at all, and I was seriously thinking about dropping out early in the race because of my stomach problem, and what kept me going was the competition and that I wanted to win the race. The money is no motivation.
Congratulations back to you, Jim.
Okay, Donna, congratulations again to Grete Waitz. Now, more of the finishers are in, and here we have it. Pizzolato, the winner, Orlando Pizzolato of Italy. Then Dave Murphy, Herbert Stepney of West Germany, Pat Peterson of Manhattan College, the United States, Giorgio De Madonna, another Italian, Spetel Niemczek of Poland, I believe, and Nick Braun. There we have the women's finishers so far. Grete Waitz, Véronique Marot of England, born in France, but runs out of York, England. Laura Fogli of Italy, another Italian there. And the others that you see. And Judy Saint-Hilaire, whom you were promoting before the race, did very well. She finished 5th, Diana. And still, the runners come and, look, stop it, will be coming for many hours to come. Halloween. New York City Marathon is also a victory of cooperation between people like the New York Road Runners Club, under whose auspices this race is conducted, along with the city of New York, Mayor Ed Koch, and all the people who help the police department do a tremendous job. The local broadcasters here help us out clearing frequencies. We're told that Gabriela Anderson, she still looks like she's going to finish the race this time and is not in bad shape. She is about the 25-mile mark right now, somewhere around Central Park South, so it looks like she will make it along with a good many thousands of others. The city of New York in the center of your picture. It's been another great day. Again, the winners of the 1984 New York City Marathon are Orlando Pizzolato of Italy and Grete Waitz of Norway. The executive producer of ABC Sports, Rune Arledge. Coverage of the New York City Marathon was produced by Kurt Gowdy Jr. Our director today was Craig Janoff, covering the race. Our preset studio director, well, that was Johnny DeLisa. Associate producers, we had Joel Feld today, and also Robbie Viner. The engineer in charge, another fantastic job by Frank Quitoni and all the men of ABC Broadcast Operations and Engineering. The technical directors, can't read everybody at this point. They go by rather quickly. But just as in the Olympics and the other tremendous efforts that we make at ABC Sports, every person you see right here has a lot to do with it and deserves a good deal of congratulations. It's been another New York City Marathon. We've been here in the studio with Diana Nyad and Marty LaQuarrie. We've had Bill Rogers, a 4-time winner, out on the course. Heard from Donna De Verona. But most of all, we've covered it from start to finish, and we've seen Orlando Pizzolato, the unknown stranger, proved